Welcome to the Finance Committee. Tonight, first up is the Fire Department. Our committee had some questions for them. They had some questions for us. And after we're done with fire, I'm going to run through the rules of how the rest of this meeting's going to go, because it is now starting our deliberative session. So fire, if you would like to take the podium, please. Hello, Chief.
Hi.
How are you?
Great, how are you?
Thank you. Good, I think. Let me know at 10.
We requested to come back. It appeared after the selectmen's presentation that there were some questions that perhaps needed to be asked or answered. So I make myself available for those.
Donna, you had a question on the boat?
Rescue boat, sister boat. I'd like to know how old it is, how many times it's gone out.
The
what's the
total number of
purpose?
calls, I don't know, over its life. We acquired that boat, I think it was in 2006 or 2004. And we don't use it a ton. It's probably less than 5 actual responses or emergency responses. We use it a few more times in training. But it's one of those pieces of equipment that, like the SCBA, there's really no substitute for when you need that particular piece of equipment. You need the town, according to Wikipedia, is about 2% of it is covered by water. We have Horse Lake, which is a long, skinny body of water. Clough Park, which is a fairly sizable piece. And what our experience was, as we spoke about the last time I was here, when we had an incident at Clough Park that resulted in 2 fatalities, the ability to get from point A to point B to point C to point D and back again, the amount of time that took with the boat that we have is really, it takes too long. It's very slow. It is 12, 13 years old. It's made out of PVC. PVC degrades through UV degradation over time. The boat is suffering from leaks, and I just think that it's time to replace that with something that has a little bit more capability to provide a little more speed across the surface of the water.
Okay, it's the first time I've heard about the leak, so that's important not to have that. But I was, I didn't know, because I'm not involved in it anymore, what the capacity as far as what makes it run. Can you get another motor? But now you said it leaks, so that's out of the question.
Well, the current boat that we have is completely inflatable, so you can only put so much of a amount of horsepower on it, and it will never plane across the water. It just kind of chugs along the water. And so the boat that we're looking for is one that has a rigid hull, but still is an inflatable tubes on the top part, so we have that a very stable platform that won't flip over and that we could really load up. But it also, because it has that rigid hull instead of that soft hull, it will allow us to plane and actually get across the surface of the water much, much faster.
Dennis?
Chief, was there any consideration to perhaps going to a small airboat where you could utilize both summer and winter rescue? No.
No.
I see blah, blah.
Yeah, no, we didn't look at that, and I'll be honest, I don't know what the cost is, but I think that cost would be much higher than what we're looking at as a complete package. Yeah.
I was asked by a couple of people to please explain the warrant article that wants 2 full-timers versus the standby and where we are on per diem. And I am not in that space. I think I understand it, but I don't want to answer that question for anybody on this panel. So if you would please explain that more clearly, I think it would help a lot of people.
Before you start, that was the Board of Selectmen had stated at the last meeting that how you were going to use the two full-time fire department were different from what you had stated, so that was.
We got confused after
Yeah,
that.
very confused.
I watched the Channel 6 broadcast, and I would agree that there was some confusion there. So from the 20,000-foot view, the issues seem to be like a Venn diagram where they overlap quite a bit. But as you drill down into it, they are completely separate pieces of the puzzle. And so it's kind of, it's that juggler that has, 6 or 7 balls in the air. And so it's hard to talk about one without talking about the other, but they are not necessarily intertwined any more than 2 separate things. So I'm going to try my best.
They're probably gonna be even more confused because there was a change that those that didn't come Monday night, they would see or hear.
Okay, yeah. All right, so why don't we, do they have a copy of the new or revised?
No,
Warrant.
because we had new handouts on Monday night.
Okay,
So anybody that was there Monday night has the Monday night, but nobody has. If they weren't there, they don't.
Just,
yeah, so we made a slight tweak to the warrant article on, are they 6 and 7 or 7 and 8? I forget the numbers, but.
Do you have yours for Monday night?
Thank you.
And I think initially what we had done as a change added a little bit of confusion. But again, I'll try my best to talk about those 2 things. But we'll let you digest it first.
Well, first, I think something needs to be cleared up because not everybody understands the difference between per diem, what I call firefighters, volunteers, but they are later, and the possible full-timers. And it doesn't seem to be clear, are we fully staffed with per diem? These are questions that I was asked, so maybe that will help you to format.
So currently, we have what we've referred to right along as per diem employees. So they're part-time employees that we hire on a daily basis to staff the fire station. We hire 2, and we work those people in 2 shifts, if you will, from 7 in the morning until,
Look, I didn't have it. You got the warrant article too?
from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. is 1 shift, so that 10-hour block. And then from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. is the second shift. Those are all per diem covered. Those personnel are in the station, ready to respond as part of its core function. During the day shift, we use those people for a lot of other activities like fire prevention and maintenance and all the other things that we do. But their core function is to be available and respond to calls, and they're paid to be in the station to do that. And those, again, are part-time, and they're generally referred to as per diem employees. At 10 p.m., we switch from the per diem employee to on-call. So it's the citizen responders, the typical volunteers, if you will, who are at home, and when there's a call, their pager goes off, and they hop in their car and they go down the station and get whatever the appropriate truck is, and they go to that. They go to that call, and they get paid an hourly rate for the time that they actually do that. Currently, they don't get any other compensation other than that hourly rate for the time that they're actually working. So the full-time article, let me back up. So some of the issues that we have experienced since we started the per diem program back in 2010 is that because those employees are not our employees, this is not their primary source of income, is that we run into scheduling issues because they might, wherever they work, they might need to work there. They might get hired overtime, they might have to work extra, they have vacations, they have family life, whatever, that interrupt that scheduled piece. And so we spend a lot of time scheduling, literally 1 to 2 hours a day, manipulating the schedule to get people in the right place at the right time. So that's one issue. We have an issue of like continuity of operations, because we see some of these people as little as once or twice a month or once a week, that we're unable to take advantage of their full potential as far as using those employees to do those other tasks that we'd like them to do. And that might be prevention, fire prevention stuff, doing inspections, public education, those kinds of activities. And that's kind of developed into a bigger issue for us, as all of those other activities have required more and more time and effort on our part. And the third thing, which is kind of one of those intangible things, is we have a concern, like a supervision concern, is again because they're not necessarily our people, and they're not necessarily working. They're working for us, but it's kind of a gray area. Is that we have a little bit of a supervision problem that we're trying to do what we're supposed to, and not get in trouble while we do it, basically. And so we have those issues, and then we have the having people that we're using for some of those per diem slots are also our call people. Not all of them, but some of them are. And so we'll end up working some of those people a lot of hours a week, 25, 30 hours a week on some people. And so they're kind of bouncing against that are they a full-time employee or not a full-time employee? And so we're trying to cap their hours so we don't incur the full-time piece, which brings in a whole host of other issues, for the most part, benefits and retirement. But we certainly get into positions where we just don't have anybody to work. And so we end up having to hire someone, not, routinely, but we've had people work overtime because we can't get people to work. And so some of those people that are working 25, 30 hours a week, they might bounce up and hit 40 hours in a week because of scheduling and staffing. So in looking at those issues, looking at the issue of that our call volume is increasing about 5% a year over the last few years on average, and projecting out where that's going to put us, right, as we start looking forward. And so when you're looking at the rate of increase in call volume, as well as all the other stuff that we do, coupled with the issues that I just described, I really think that we're at that point where we need to start looking at a different solution, which is the full-time staff. In looking at the numbers, my best educated guess is we kind of look at 2023 as being that breakover point of where we're going to be at 1,000 incidents a year, plus all the other stuff that we do. That's going to create a tremendous amount of pressure on this department to provide service in the model that we're in. So I think that the time has come to start looking at converting that, what we call per diem employee, to full-time and get us into a 24-hour model within the next couple years, and that'll solve that issue of 10 to 7, which we haven't quite talked about yet, but is a big piece of this as well. So the 10 to 7 piece, which is covered by our volunteer call people, is works from like 10 to midnight, kind of works after midnight to a certain point, and really kind of disappears and is really sketchy post 3 o'clock in the morning, post 2 o'clock in the morning, because people have to get up, go to their regular jobs, which is not working for Weare Fire.
Okay.
And so when we see calls come in of any type, but most critical are the medical calls, we see our response times shoot up from what was, travel time to go from the fire station to the house, maybe 5 or 10 minutes. Our response times have gone up to 15, 25, 30 minutes. We had a call the other night, took us 30 minutes to get an ambulance to the scene. Totally unacceptable. For a community of nearly 10,000 people, that we shouldn't accept that. And so as the person who's responsible for that, we bring forward what is the first step in kind of a 4-step program of solving all of those issues, and it begins with that full-time piece to incrementally build up to getting to 8, so that once we hit 4, right, so not necessarily year 1's tough, year 2 we really start seeing the benefit of having that 24-hour piece come in. So how does it all fit together? Well, we have 2 warrant articles. One is for the full-time piece. I think that's pretty straightforward. The call piece, we're looking to add some stipend money, the standby pay. Do you want me to answer that now?
Well, the full-time warrant articles, some people had questions, still a little confused.
I'm going to come back to that in just a second.
Okay, all right.
So the standby stipend piece is kind of a Band-Aid. We're going to hopefully throw a little bit of money at that piece to see if we can shore up some of those fractures in that time period between 10 and 7 a.m. in order to buy us some time until we can get that full-time piece to the point where we can kind of cover into that time period. Now, the confusion the other night, I think, was that Chairman of the Board of Selectmen was thinking that those full-time people were going to be applied into that time block, 10 to 7, and that's not necessarily the case on day 1, for sure. I think once we get those people up and who those people are and skill sets, we can say we want to hire a paramedic, but will we be able to hire a paramedic? I hope so, but that's not guaranteed. And as they get trained and geared up and actually get in place where they can provide, service without having a lot of supervision, is we might be able to move those into that time space to help kind of chip away at those issues that we have in that 10 to 7 piece, but that's not where we're going to plug them in on day 1. So in the warrant article for the full-time people, we had intended to, in year 2, which I think you have a spreadsheet that shows the build-out years. Mm-hmm. We had intended to, in year 2, to start offsetting some of those costs with a reduction in the per diem wages. Listening to the Finance Committee the last time we were here and in the discussion with the Board of Fire Wards, it was, at the end of the day, it was decided to, let's move that into year 1 and show what we did, or what we had planned to do in the initial version was to offset some of those costs in the full-time piece with money that existed in the budget currently, right, out of that per diems funds. That language was not necessarily overly clear in the first generation, and that's why we came back when we made another revision, which shows in this 11419 document that you have, which says if the full-time warrant article passes, there will be a corresponding reduction in wages from the per diem line, which is, I think they call it EMT firefighter in that document.
Okay, let me see.
So that's the change since we were here last. I know there's a lot of information there and it goes all over the place. It's,
Okay, are we looking at 114?
so So 7 and 8, I think, are the,
I didn't make the changes yet.
oh, you didn't?
Okay, that's why I can't find the changes.
I'm
No,
sorry.
because half of it
That'll-
This is
was
changed.
people came and-
This is changed because.
Oh, I
they
thought
don't
this
have the- they
document
don't have
had the
language
changes
to
in it.
No,
reference.
I gave the
If this is
document that
approved,
they
this is,
put
you
that
don't
I'm
need this
sorry.
one. That's taken out.
Pardon me
So
for
they
the
are
confusion. Yeah,
separated.
I thought the changes had been made in this document, and I apologize for that.
Okay,
Seeing the changes aren't made in
Yeah.
here.
So what we had proposed in the selectmen's meeting Monday night was that for the full-time article, which I
okay,
think is number 7,
yes,
is that should that article pass, that there will be a reduction in the part-time EMT firefighter line of $39,312.
39,000,
312.
Does that sound right?
okay.
And then in the next article, which is the standby pay, from memory, I think we struck the last sentence, which was if this passes, it's
Yeah.
null and void.
Yes,
We
that's
struck
out of
that out. So that article stands on its own.
Good.
So that there was more of a direct relationship between what we were doing and where we were taking the money from.
Does,
That clears it.
Clear as mud?
No, that
Okay.
clears, that
Does
clears
that
up.
help
That
you?
clears it. Oh, that helps me.
Okay.
That's the question I had last time I was here. I said, how do you add 2 people and not
Tom's
reduce over
expression
here?
is it's not quite as clear
Tom?
as that.
No, I missed something, I guess, on Monday night when you were talking about it. So, Article 8, you're taking out that last line, so that will not become null and void.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
Right.
The standby pay, and like I said, so they're independent, and yet they're somewhat, there's a relationship between the two of them, for sure, is that Article 8, the standby pay, is an attempt to buy us some time
okay,
to get from where we are today to where we are in the future, where we can put those full-time people into that time slot
okay.
and cover that.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
I just want to make sure
Bill.
I'm good.
Yep.
I think I got it. You said you wouldn't have that coverage in the station in year 1, but possibly in year 2 if you got 2 more or whatever next year. Once you get to a level where you, whatever year it is, where you got 4 full-time, then you would envision,
So year 1 is 6 months. So even if
Right.
they start July 1st, there's some period of time that we're going to just need to get them, as the police department, do that kind of that field training piece.
Yeah.
You know, get them up to speed. This is how we do business. You know, all of that stuff. And then from whatever point is, let's say that takes 3 months. So that only gives us 3 months left of the year. And then we can look at, well, where's best to put those people where we're getting the best bang for our buck.
so it's even conceivable after that break-in period that you might be able to.
Yeah.
It's how you use the force that you got. I mean,
Correct.
you might be able to cover
Correct,
some
and,
of
and
those hours.
one of the things that we have, opposed to maybe the 2 other departments, is that, is we have no schedule, we have no past practice, we have no CBA, so there's a much more flexibility to do that, as we get geared up. But really, the year 2 piece, right, where we come back and we say, you know, let's add 2 more to get us to 4, that's where we can solve a lot of problems that we talked about tonight. This is step 1. So if anyone's listened to me talk before, where they say, well, you know, what's the plan for the fire department, is that, you know, here's where we are, here's where we need to be at some point. You know, when is that point going to be as far as time goes? And to make that transition or that ramp up in cost, because at the end of the day, it's all about money, is make that as gradual as possible. This community, just in my time here, has suffered at really the not maintaining and not planning for some of those expenses as we go forward. And and we've seen it with, we saw it with why the per diem program got here in the first place is because we didn't necessarily plan for that kind of collapse of the EMS system during the day. We saw it in, the police cruiser issue. We see it in, the road issue as it is now, as we're faced with this very large monetary decision that needs to be made. And we're trying to avoid that by saying, hey, look, this is what's coming. And this is how we propose to deal with it. And we can either start doing it now at little bites and little cost increments, relatively little. I understand that it's real money, but, or we could wait until it becomes a critical decision, like the per diem program was back in 2010, and we're scrambling around to say, all right, well, we need to come up with $500,000 this year to do something. And it seems like when we get into those positions, we don't make necessarily the best financial decisions once we get into the crisis mode. So we're trying to avert that crisis mode and preserve all the great things that we've done in the last 8 years.
Donna?
Chief, Article 8, you have a dollar sign there. Are you going to try to use the people that you have standby or pull more people in for the standby so you don't
That's for the
burn out?
The people that we have currently. We were very fortunate this year to pick up 2 or 3 people to help out with that. But really, when it comes down to, as we get closer to further past midnight and closer to 7, we're really down to 2 or 3 key critical people. And we need to kind of, I guess, really kind of buy their participation or their availability. Because literally they're going out day after day, and we're burning those people out and without really being able to offer them anything more than an hourly rate. And so we're trying to put a Band-Aid on a problem until we can have the cavalry arrive.
But the ones you're using now, if you put them on standby, they're already getting paid. Is that stipend also going to be above that?
The stipend is relatively small. I think we're looking at 1 hour's pay.
But that's
for
not
every
the
4 hours.
question I'm asking. Is that going to be extra on top
Yep.
of what they're making now? So say if they're making $22 for a paramedic and they get standby, they're going to get extra money by that standby and make $30 an hour by the number. I'm just using that as a number. I'm not holding you to it.
Yep.
But that's what it boils down to. They're going to get more money.
Yeah. Just one correction, none of our people make $22 an hour.
That's what I said. It was a
No,
just
I get that. I just want to
right.
put that
And
out
I
there
know
that-
they don't.
We're not at that level.
They don't.
And, this would be in addition to that hourly rate. So
They're
they
getting
get a little bit
married.
of a premium, but at the end of the day, those are the only people that are coming. And when we find out they're not coming, and we have to go to say, well, let's call Goffstown now, we've already chewed up 10 minutes, and then Goffstown's 20 minutes away.
I
and
understand that
we're-
part. Yes.
So
But I just wanted to make sure that
it is,
maybe I ought
our
to
business
become an
is all about
EMT.
response time, because even though there's different levels of emergency, if you you stubbed your toe, right, we don't need to get there in 10 seconds flat. But if you're having one of those medical emergencies where you'd like us to get there as quickly as possible, our response times have fallen way out of what should be acceptable, certainly for a community of this size.
Bill?
And just to clarify though, the standby pay, it isn't our, it's 4 hours of standby, you get 1 hour pay, I think
Correct.
is what you told us
Yep.
before. So it isn't like a one-for-one type of.
It's not a one-for-one thing. People are not going to make a living on this.
No.
This is really really throwing them a bone for being there for us.
Right.
And again, we're just trying to buy time.
Yeah. So this call force in Article 8 refers to the people that volunteer and get a small stipend for their service, not the per diem people that come in during the day, correct?
Correct.
And so this is just an incentive to say, don't go skiing this weekend, we need you, kind of thing. Be here.
Right, well, so what we're saying to our people is, because we divide them up into work groups. And so you have a call night, so you have
Right.
one call night a week from 10 to 7, and then one Friday and one Saturday night. So one Friday night and one Saturday night every 4-week rotation. And so what we're saying is, we need you to be available, and so we'd like to compensate you for maintaining that availability, and thanks. And because the other solution to this, as we discussed numbers in the out years, is expensive. And so we want to maintain that system as long as we can, and we've done a great job doing that up until now. But what we see on the horizon is that system's going to fail. And you may not see that failure until the tone goes off and says, you know, Mrs. Smith is having a heart attack. And that's not the time to find out that no one's coming.
Any more questions?
Keith?
Keith, sorry.
So if you get the 2 full-time people now.
Yep.
You don't get them a year from now, will you then be in a position, will you still be in a position to apply the 2 that you get now, which are now up and trained by next year, into that overnight time, so you'll address your response time?
It's very possible. And again, once we get those people in, and we'll apply them to where we get the best bang for our buck. And we know that issue might be the overnight piece. And so, you know, when we get out to year 2, there's going to be even more pressure now than it is this year to deal with that issue. And so we may find that that's where we end up working those people, is in that time slot.
Go ahead.
So, Chief, you.
Oh, hold on just a sec, Keith.
You might want to point out that about the hours, we can't.
Rory, can you take the mic, please?
Steve, if you're going to talk, you need to come up here, please.
No, I
okay.
got it. Go ahead, Keith.
You need
So,
more than 2.
in response to what he just said, you have 80 hours basically effectively. I realize it doesn't cover the whole
Yep.
stretch, but it covers a big part of it. So it bothers me that you can't say definitively that that's exactly what you would use those people for, because when you sat here last week, or 2 weeks ago, whenever was you here last, you made it very clear that your number 1 priority was response time. And tonight, you just made it very clear again that 2 a.m. to 5 a.m., with your 15-minute to 30-minute response time, is absolutely a more severe problem.
It is a severe problem.
So,
And that's why I said when I started this is from 20,000 feet, there's this huge overlap in those 2 issues. But as you drill down, you find that they're very separate.
when you
Oh,
say
hold
those
on just a sec.
Well, what is the 2? I don't understand your question. I don't understand your response. What 2 issues are you referring to?
So there's the issue of the 10 to 7 piece. Very real problem. There's the issue that we've experienced with all of the issues that go along with the per diem program, having part-time employees that really aren't our employees. They're just, we hire them in for the day and they work. And they bring their own tremendous skill set, but it also comes with a lot of other issues with it. And so as we stand up this full-time piece, we're going to find that we have, let's say we don't get anybody else. We have 2 people. And so we have 2 employees that are working 42 hours a week. So that gives me 84 hours to apply. If we were to put them together on the same shift, we're going to get four days of coverage out of them, right? So 4 12-hour shifts a week out of them. If we separate them and work them into some variation of a shift, one of the shifts is a pitman shift schedule, you could work them singularly and cover 12 hours, 7 days a week. Now, if we did 12 hours, 7 days a week with just one person, then we need to pick up a person so that we could transport someone to the hospital, because we need 2 as a minimum. And so it isn't as easy as saying, I'm just going to throw them at night coverage and we're going to be all set. There's some other moving pieces to that. I'd love to come in here and say, you know what, we need 4 or we need 8, but we can't come in and say we need 8 and expect to get funded for 8. And so this was a stepped program to start down the road to get to where we need to be, that I feel is as economical as it can be to get there.
Dennis?
And
So,
still accomplish what we need to accomplish.
so in reading Article 7, if the voter comes in and reads this right now,
You can't
Doesn't-
read that one because that's not the right one.
well, I understand there's going to be a few changes.
Yep.
But the meat of it is, you're looking for 2 full-time fire
Correct.
EMT personnel. When they come read this, they're not realizing the impact of what you're looking for is 8 over 5 years. And they're not looking at it and saying, well, we only need 2, we're gonna solve the problem. How are you gonna address that? How are we gonna address that to the public? Because really, what you're saying is this is just one piece of the puzzle.
This is one piece of the puzzle.
Can I weigh in?
It's not written that way.
But it's not saying that by agreeing to number 7 in 2019 is we're getting all 8. It's not saying you're agreeing to the whole plan, you're just agreeing to 2 people this year, and then we're gonna come back and say we need, and I'm open to explaining all of that, but we're not buying 8 today, we're buying 2.
This kind of comes in, if I can weigh in a little bit, when we do our CIP plan, just like the police need X amount of cruisers or highway wants X amount of trucks. When they write the warrant article, Benji's warrant article doesn't say, I need trucks for the next 6-10 years. And that's basically the way his is. And when he did CIP, he went through that just as Benji did, but at the end of the day, their warrant article does not say that. Any more questions?
Just to
Tom?
clarify, even with the 2, though, it's going to be an improvement for the department because it takes care of some of your daytime issues with the per diems who sometimes can't be there for whatever personal reasons.
It solves some of those issues and it sets the stage to deal with the issue that we have from 10 to 7. And again, we can't, honestly, right? We can't come in here and say, I need 8 people next year, right? And so it is the beginning of a solution. And it may take us, the voters might say, you know what? It's going to take us 10 years to get there. I'm here to tell you there's a problem. And here's a solution to that problem that I think is economically viable. And, but we need to begin that process. I mean, seriously, we need to begin that process. Because when our system collapses, it is not a good, right? Because then, we get forced into these economic decisions because of some crisis that occurs. And I'm saying, not to scare you, that's not how, I don't operate that way. But I'm saying, we're looking at the future 4 or 5 years from now where the model we're in does not work. No one's doing the model we're in.
Any other questions, comments?
There were some questions about the car. I don't know if we need to talk about that.
Any questions on the vehicles? Nope, apparently we're good
One
there.
other thing that we did Monday night was the article, which I think is 24 in your package, which was to look to return some of the insurance money to a fund.
Ricky's article.
We let the Board of Selectmen know that we weren't interested in pursuing that, and I believe they took that off.
Did you take that off? So Article 24 for the unexpended fund balance business, we can cross that off.
Yep.
Everybody putting that down in their notes, so we have that for future reference. Okay, if there's no more questions, thank you very much
very
for
much for the
coming in and
opportunity.
answering questions. Okay, going forward, Finance Committee is now going to start their deliberation process. All right. Keith is excused for a few minutes. We are going to establish some ground rules here. Since it is our deliberative, we now are only going to have discussion amongst ourselves. We are not going to have anybody commenting from the public, from the audience, unless there is a financial question, a hardcore, how much money is this business, of one particular person where they can give you the exact answer. We are not going to ask anybody in the audience for a philosophy, how did this go, how did that. We have had those discussions. So we now need to start weighing in as us. We are all allowed to have our personal opinions, but at no point do we go after anybody for disagreeing or having a different philosophy. And Neil, I'm going to turn this over to you on the ground rules of the meeting as vice chair, please.
Thank you.
Please, you're either up there or over here.
Thank you, Lori. The committee has two options with respect to each article. We can either recommend it or not recommend it. We can't amend them, we can't change them. That's the only thing we can do. Our recommendations will be incorporated with an explanation in a mailer that goes out to everybody, to all the voters, and I'm sure all of you have gotten those in the past. So once we have a vote and we made a decision, at some later point, probably not tonight, tonight we're just going to make decisions, we will sit down and write the explanations so that we justify the recommendation, and that explanation, we call it a blurb, will be what's put in the mailer, along with the vote. So the vote is 7-6 or 13-0, whatever it is. After we finish tonight, we'll have another meeting where we do the town. Tonight we're just doing the schools. And then our recommendations, we will get together and write these blurbs, and those will first go to the deliberative session. So when we go to the deliberative session, there'll be a piece of paper on which all these recommendations appear. It'll be on the same desk where people come to register. They'll pick those up, we'll go through the meeting. When the meeting is over, there's two school meetings and the town meeting, the committee will reconvene and decide whether or not anything that occurred at the deliberative session would cause us to want to change any of our recommendations, because in many cases an article will be amended. And it's the amended article that's going to the voters, so we need to respond to the amended article. If there are no amendments, presumably there's nothing that would change our minds, so we wouldn't have to reconvene. But in many cases there are amendments. Or, for some reason, there's new information that people have to have, so we want to reconsider something. As I say, we have two options for tonight, recommend or not recommend. What we've done in the past, and it's worked reasonably well, we take the affirmative option first. So after we've had our discussion on an article, the chair is going to say, you guys ready to vote? And without anybody making a motion and seconding it, the motion will be, are you in favor of recommend? Everybody raises their hands. And then she'll ask, are you opposed? Everybody raises their hand. Who's abstaining? And then she'll announce the decision. 8-4, 13-0, whatever it is, the vote is in favor. If that's the case, we'll go on to the next article. But if the motion fails, if it's 5 in favor and 8 opposed, then the chair will take the next motion, will make the next motion, as the motion will be to not recommend Article 7. Okay? And then you vote yes if you want the words to appear not recommend. And you'll vote no if you feel otherwise. So the vote on that one is probably going to be 8-5, right? It was 5-8 on the first one, probably going to be 8-5. And the reason we do this is that we don't want to infer from a loss that everybody will vote the same way. But usually that's what happens. So we go through the second motion to make sure that we have a positive recommendation. The positive recommendation, of course, is for a negative outcome, a not recommend, but it is a positive action that we're taking. I think that's the procedure. So, are there any questions? Chris?
This is a kind of a philosophical question, and it may sound long, but I think it can streamline some things. We can either decide on a percentage increase and try to squeeze our approvals into that percentage and come out with a product and say, here, people, we did this for you. Or we can go case by case by case, every single article on its merits independently of what it would cost the town, and let them cherry pick whether they want to raise their taxes or not. So is there one philosophy over the other to that?
The requirement that we have, and I'm sorry, can't find it right away, in the ordinance is to make recommendations, not cherry picking.
So we
leave
it to them, to the voters. If they want to raise their taxes, they vote for all these. If they don't, they vote no on the ones they don't want.
What we are doing is making a recommendation for a balance between what people would like to have, what all these proposals are, and what taxpayers can afford.
Well, that was the question, because if we think that it would raise taxes, are we voting on the merit of the request, or are we trying to limit things to keep taxes low?
That's up to you, of course.
Okay.
But the committee is charged with producing a recommendation which balances the two things that I mentioned.
Okay.
Okay, that's what our charge is. We've never decided, okay, we're only going to have a 1.1% increase or a 15-cent increase, and then tried to work to that.
Okay,
We've
that answers the question.
We've always gone through the articles, but at the end, we look at what we've done, and sometimes we say, oh my God.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we go back and say, do we really need the loader? Do we really need the truck? Do we really need the school resource officer? To try to bring it down, because we realize that the recommendation is going to cause a lot of pain for too many people. So,
Okay. But if it's a reasonable and necessary request, we could conceivably recommend it and say, if you vote for this, your taxes are going to go up.
I would not do that, because I think that does not comply with the ordinance. In that case, we would recommend every single article, because all of these have some merit.
Yeah, well, some more than others, but yeah.
But the point is, our job is not to say this is a good article. Our job is to look at them individually, but also as a group, so that we can say, this is a reasonable increase in the tax burden for the benefits that we're getting, and it would be our judgment unreasonable to get the extra benefits that come with other articles, because the tax burden increase would be unreasonable.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Does that help?
Yes.
Are there any questions on this?
May I, Madam
ahead.
Chairman, distribute something which I originally wrote for myself, but I thought I'd like to share it. It's a compilation of what's happened in all three school meetings. And I sent it to Bill, and he emailed it to everybody. The one that you have is out of date already. It's dated the 15th. This new one is the 16th, and that's because Bill said, Neil, there are a few errors in here. And of course, he was right.
So mine is out, because I did the same thing.
So, the one you have now it should be dated on the third page, January 16th.
Yep.
Okay. I've also been told there's an error in this still, and I'll tell you, I just want to explain what this is. First, you've got the Weare schools, then John Stark, number 2, and on the next page, the Weare town. And in each case, you have the default budget, the operating budget, and all the warrant articles. Most of this information was literally, oh, sorry, do we not?
I think she has some.
I made 20, and I hope that's enough.
This is
In
still in there.
in each case, the information has been copied from the documents that we were given, or I put some asterisks and explained why I've made changes. The one error that I know so far is on page 1, Weare Schools, the default budget, that's the first line. At the very end of that line, you see tax. Catherine tells me that that should be $895, not $951.
For Article 3.
This is for Article 3, the default budget. Okay.
0.95.
Yep. Now, what I've done here is to give you what happened in 2018. That's the base that we're starting with. That's the second column. Then the proposed, whatever the organization has proposed in the third column, 2019. The increase in the next column in dollars, and then the percentage increase compared to 2018, and then the tax impact, which is copied directly from the various warrant articles. And if there's a mistake there, I inverted two numbers that Bill caught, we'll have to correct those. And then that last line,
Can I, just because we all know my
Just one
math is
second.
great.
on the last line, you see a bunch of blanks. And for me, that's where I'm going to mark what I'm trying to do and put in, so if I'm voting in favor of the default budget in Weare, I would write down $895. And if I'm in favor of the teacher's contract, Article 4, I would write down $24. And then I could total up what I've done at the end and compare that, as you'll see later on, with some other information. Yes, Lori?
I just want to make sure, because we know I should never do math in public. That $10.13, is that per thousand?
Yes.
1026, according to what they gave out.
Yes, let me explain. Do you see where it says full-day kindergarten?
Yep. Oh, you took off what they're
I-
going to get from the state.
I took off what they're going to get for the state because it seems to me unfair if you don't do that. So that's different from what they have. As a result, instead of this costing Weare taxpayers $327.50, which is what the warrant says, it only costs them $295. In other words, to do this budget, the increase in a home for an individual with a $250,000 home will be $295. Then you go down to Stark. The same thing happens, except that in the increase column, this is the Weare increase only, not the total John Stark increase, but just for Weare. The percentages refer to the total, and again, you have the budget, so you can see what the options are. The tax. If we adopt all of the John Stark items, according to the John Stark literature, that will cost us $160. So,
Neil, can I stop you for a second?
sure.
When we made those changes in the increase from 146 to 89,000, for example,
Yep.
isn't the tax rate in the far right now need correction?
Bill, I don't know. I just copied that exactly from what the school superintendent and Catherine gave us.
All right.
So, if you're right, and you may be, this is the information that we've gotten. I wasn't trying to make judgments.
Okay.
I was just trying to compile it. Going over to the next page, you see Weare, again, the default budget on top. The road paving bond is 0, but just for your information, if this is a 10-year bond, okay, and the roads are supposed to last 10 years. So if it's a 10-year bond, we'll be paying an extra $250,000 next year, plus $68,000 in interest, if it comes out to be 2.75%. So that's going to be a significant tax increase next year. And the reason why it's 0 now is in the year in which you borrow money, you don't pay principal or interest. You get a year's grace before
You said $275,000 next year plus $68,000?
$250,000 plus 68.
Okay, I knew I heard it wrong.
But it's 0 this year, and that's the way everybody's treating it. But just so you folks know, that is a fact.
And going down from there.
And each year,
68,000 goes down.
the 68,000 goes down, the 250 would be the same, because you're paying 1/10 of the
Microphones.
principal each year, repaying. According to my numbers, because the town didn't give us this information, the increase to 498 and the tax rate will cost a homeowner $198. Going on to the fourth page, here you see the numbers about the homeowner's increase. 295 from the schools, 160 from Stark, 198 from the town. County, I assume there's a 2% increase in the county tax. The state education tax is not likely to increase. That comes up to $658, or an 11.95% increase over what this homeowner was paying last year. As you can see below, last year, and that tax is wrong, it's 2303. That might be higher, lowering the percentage. Got to correct that, too. Last year, the taxpayer was paying 5507. With another 658, his tax bill goes up to 6165, which is, again, the almost 12% increase. And then number 5 is the tax rate, and you can see exactly what will happen. This year, we're paying 2303 in 2018. 2019, if everything passes, it goes up to 2565. One other fact which is helpful in our deliberations is number 6. Based on current valuations, every time we increase spending or increase the appropriation by $100,000, that's 12 cents on the tax rate, and an extra $30 on a typical homeowner's tax bill. So if you want to spend $100,000 for something, you're saying, I'm willing to increase the taxes on a typical home by $30. It's just a rule of thumb so you can get a sense of how significant whatever decisions we are. Okay. If there are any questions, I'd be pleased to answer them, and if anybody has an idea to make this better, please let me know. And if there are any other errors, please let me know. Thank you.
Tom?
A couple of things. First, going back to the beginning of the discussion of looking at each item on their merits, I believe that's an important part of the discussion, although that may, in fact, lead to times when we have to look at it and say, it's time for an adjustment, because the needs of the town or the schools are there, so there's a need for that adjustment. The other thing is that on some of them, particularly with the town, if, for example, there were a dump truck purchased last year, and we're purchasing it again this year, it really wouldn't be an increase over last year's expenditures. It would be a flat line over last year's expenditures. So, not everything there that's listed would actually result in an increase, because, you're duplicating something that you did last year.
So it's built into the tax rate already.
It's already, that's what I'm saying. In cases such as the dump truck or the road reconstruction, it's not a new expense above and beyond what was spent in 2018. It would be the same as what was spent in 2018.
I think I understand that, but the cost of that truck is already in the $4.19 that we paid last year. And if we buy another truck, doesn't that raise our tax rate by the...
You're not going to raise the tax rate because the truck...
It's paid off.
That truck is paid for. You're not paying for it as last year's truck again. You're buying a new truck, but you're paying the same amount as you paid last year. That $215,000 is going to be the same this year as the $250,000 last year. So it's not an increase over last year's. And again, road reconstruction is another one that pops out at me right away.
Maybe before we
When-
vote
and
on
when
the
we-
town, we can find out.
Yeah, I'd like to work with you to try to correct this, Tom. Thank you for that.
Because you're talking zero base and build it up, rather than...
Right, it would be like we hadn't ever had road reconstruction or ever had a dump truck before, when in fact we did
add
just
on.
last year.
Okay,
Let's work together to make sure we get this right.
we're going to start with John Stark because it is the easiest budget to work with. So if everybody has their sheets, does everybody have sheets to tell them what we're doing? Neil, I'm going to have you read the John Stark budgets proposals, please, so I
Okay,
don't
I know
croak
your
at most of
voice
the
is,
people.
Okay.
Larry, do you have another copy of the John Stark warrant article? or no?
I do not.
You have it?
I-
Okay, somebody got
The,
it?
um,
Have we copy?
The first item for us to consider on the John Stark warrant is Article 3. Shall the John Stark School District raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special or separate warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth on the budget posted with the warrant, or as amended by vote of the first session for the purposes set forth therein, totaling $13,645,903. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $13,550,703, which is the same as last year with certain adjustments required by previous action of the district or by law, or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 40:13, 10, and 16 to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. So the question before us is, shall we recommend the John Stark budget of $13,645,000, call it $646,000?
Neil, can you tell us the difference percentage-wise between that and the default?
The default is a 1% increase, and this is a 1.7% increase. Let me start off the discussion. We live in good times. The economy's booming. The unemployment rate is so low that pizza joints are shutting down because they can't get employees. 900 Degree Pizza had a second store. I don't know where it was. The woman had to the owner had to close it because she couldn't get people to work. I'm told restaurants are cutting their hours because they can't get adequate staff. So anybody who wants to work can. We have a 2.5% unemployment rate. Wages are going up. Somebody told me Duncan is now paying $10.50 an hour.
Not starting.
That's the impression I got, but I don't know that.
That's what they have posted.
Oh,
That's correct.
because one of my teenagers that works for me didn't start at that.
Yes, well, this is what's happening now. The middle class is getting wage increases. Everybody is. Social Security went up 2.8% last year. So, although the elderly don't necessarily see that because health insurance also goes up, so for some of us it was a net decrease of $1. It still represents a reasonable amount of money for inflation. In my view, the Stark budget is going up 1.7%, and I know I'm not supposed to talk about the next article, but to me, it's a package because it's salaries. The support staff contract is 0.5%. Together, that's 2.2%. That's less than inflation. So, from my point of view, Stark is acting reasonably, and I would support the budget because it's a reasonable budget increase. And I would also support the staff contract. The other things we can talk about, but the reason, well, I'll talk about the staff contract later. But
Neil?
the budget is a reasonable one at a 1.7% increase in an economy that's going up.
Yeah, because we'll have to talk about the
2.8%.
staff. Frank brings up a good point on how that all actually lays out in increases, so we're going to need to get those numbers.
Okay.
But who wants to lead the discussion on how you feel about the proposed versus the default budgets? Chris?
Yeah, I attended all of the Stark board meetings and whatnot, and I saw that they made a concerted effort after the initial presentation of their budget to comb through it, and they did take out quite a number of things that they felt could ride over until another budget. So this is a very conscientiously derived budget that they made.
Anyone else?
Sure.
Bill?
Yeah, I'll just note that the proposed budget increases over last year, the 1.7% is about $227,000. This year, if it reverts to a default budget, it still results in an increase of $132,000. I know last year, the proposed budget for last year for Stark passed, but the proposed budget last year was actually lower than the year before, which is probably why it passed. Where you don't have that much of a difference and you're still getting an increase with a default budget, and the difference is around 100,000 between the two, I'm more inclined to support the default budget, knowing the other items that we have here before us, such as the next item, which is going to result in considerably more increases after a 3-year period. But call me cheap, but I'm trying to squeeze a penny wherever I can in order to make sure that we're funding things that may be important elsewhere in the town. And I don't think it's that big a difference between the default and proposed that it's going to have that much of an impact on the school.
Dennis?
Thank you.
I fully support it. That's your question.
Greg?
I gotta think about it.
I would support the proposed.
Anyone else?
Default. I support the
Just,
default on this one.
My reasoning is because of the very percentages that Neil referred to, that even with the combination with the support staff contract, it falls into a pattern that pretty much matches the inflation rate that's often referred to, the Social Security rate.
Neil?
If it turns out later on that there are some other things that we really feel are very important and have to have, then we can go back to this and say, forget the operating, let's go to the default. But in line with what Chris is saying, at this point, and I've made my check marks on this thing, at this point, I think it's not an unreasonable thing to support the operating budget. If we need the 100,000 that Bill's talking about, or whatever the exact number is, we can get that. We can get that later if necessary.
And as Neil had brought up, like when he was saying it's $30, every single $100,000 that you spend, it's $30. So you're looking at a difference between the budget default and the budget proposed for a $250,000 house. It's like $17 a year. I mean,
But they add up, those $17.
no, I agree. I'm just saying, in case anybody didn't do the math, that, I mean, that's what it adds
Yeah.
up to. And there wasn't merits in what they proposed. And the increases were realistic increases.
Tammy? And if you don't want to verbalize your opinion yet, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I'm still going back and forth. I didn't go to the meetings. I did watch them, the recordings. I felt like they were reasonable, and I don't, like Megan said, I don't think that it's that much of an increase between the default and the proposed, that it would be something that we should not consider.
James?
Madam Chairman, I don't think it's necessary to ask each person
Well,
his
I'm
opinion.
trying to get a discussion going because,
Well, if people have comments to make, I'm sure we will raise our hands and ask to be recognized. But we show our opinion when you call the vote and we raise our hands for one or the other of the options. Sometimes there's no discussion. People have made up their minds and we know how we're going to vote, and let's get on with business.
Sue?
I would like to say that I do, at this point, I do support the budget, but I would like to make a point where I've heard Neil say that the school takes out you'll match the default, and there are many lines, not so much in John Stark, it's a lot more at Center Woods or at the Weare schools, but there are a lot of default lines that are higher than proposed, and I don't agree with that practice. But the overall budget, I think, is reasonable.
I'm going to give my opinion. I'm a default person. I happen to feel that while the taxpayers have to live within a budget every year, I do not see that coming consistently. And it's nice to say that Social Security only went up 2.8%, and isn't that wonderful? I don't get Social Security. A lot of people in this town don't. And at the end of the day, there are a large number of people running at that $74,000 income level, and it's nice to say $17, $30 is not a lot of money. For some of us, that may be true. For others, it is not true. And I happen to feel that people need to learn to live within their budgets before they go around increasing them. So I am a definite default.
Just to clarify what I meant, I'm not talking about Social Security increase as the amount going into people's pension checks or whatever, but as an inflationary index, because that's where that comes from. So that inflationary index reflects on those items that people go out to purchase as well. Like you can assume your grocery bill probably went up by a similar percentage, and your car payment went up by a similar percentage. I wasn't saying, yes, I am on Social Security, I'm getting a 2.8% raise.
No, I understand that. That wasn't an attack at anybody, but the fact of the matter is, the schools are able to move things around just like the town is, and a lot of taxpayers don't have that ability, and that's why I choose to do what I do. Any other discussions? Okay, Neil, following our ground rules, is there any more discussion? Are you ready to vote? The question before us is to recommend the proposed operating budget, which is Article 3 for John Stark. If you are in favor of recommending this article, please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay.
Okay, where'd we go? If you are opposed, please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4. Okay.
Does anyone abstain?
At a 9-4 vote, Madam.
I know, but it's still, the question is asked. We don't want anybody to say I missed something here. Okay.
You were questioning your own math, right?
My math, yes, absolutely. We could have gotten another person in here I don't know about.
And before we go on, I was trying to inject some light before with this budget article, but I forgot I'm also here to inject some sweetness. We have some candy. I am not taking this home, so if what you don't eat now, you have to take with you when you go home.
But it says pot
So
of
please-
gold. What's on the end?
Please pass it around. Thank you.
Okay, you ladies first.
Therefore, the motion to recommend the article passes. You've got this?
I got it. In fact, I got who, I should record who if it gets, because technically if it gets brought up later, it should, no?
You don't need to record who.
You don't need the Robert's Rules of Order with the, if it were to get re-brought up later, it has to be somebody in the majority? No? No?
Technically, yes, but normally, and also,
So-
sometimes you just rely on honesty.
Reconsider.
So if we're going back to this, because we figured out we've done too many yays and this thing is off the charts, we don't have to go back and rebalance this
The
out.
general understanding is that when we go back,
Yeah.
you can open up any article, and certainly this could be one of those if we find that we do need an extra $100,000 or whatever the amount is, and we can get it by putting this into default rather than in proposed.
Okay.
So these are all I won't say tentative votes, but they can be revisited.
Okay, we will now consider the next article, Article number 4. Neil, you're on deck.
John Stark, Article number 4. Shall the John Stark School District vote to approve the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the John Stark School Board and the John Stark Support Personnel Association, which calls for the following increases in salaries and benefits at the current staffing levels over those paid in the prior fiscal year. For the year 2019 to 20, $70,647. 2021 to $26,538. 21-22, $27,163. And I would add, and I hope Frank Campana is listening, I would add that the total cost of this contract is $292,180 over its 3-year life. The first year is $70,000, but it's $292 that will ultimately affect us in taxes over the next 3 years, should this pass. Oh, and further raise and appropriate the sum of $70,647 for the school year 2019-20, such sum representing the additional costs attributable to the increase in salaries and benefits over those of the appropriation at current staffing levels.
Okay. We're open for discussion. Does anybody have anything to say? Chris?
When I read this, I get it, this is the total dollar amount, this won't change anything, but in the contract, section 9.2, it said something was retroactive to 2014, and I didn't understand what that meant.
Right, is that this contract, or that's a teacher's contract, right?
Was it the teachers or the paras?
This is the John Stark support staff.
Mhm.
I'm going to ask a direct question, and I'm going to open it up to Lorraine or Kathleen for an explanation of that, please.
Hopefully it will be typo.
That would be nice.
I'm sorry, what was the article?
In the contract, section 9.2.
You could offer the audience.
I don't trust candy from anybody. I thought that as a kid.
Can we have you up at the podium, please? If we're going to be spectacles, you get to be a spectacle with us.
I don't have the 13-14 contract with me, but the way this reads is employees working 30-plus hours and at least 180 days during the 13-14 school year will receive the same cash back as awarded in 13-14. I just want to make note, this language was not opened. So this language has been standing language. We did not, during negotiations, this was not discussed, okay? Employees hired after 2014 will receive $2,800 as cash back. So I think to clarify your question, Chris, is you want to know how much employees were receiving back in 13-14. And as I said, I don't have that contract.
Yeah, well, the number, if it's already built in to an agreement prior.
It is.
Then it's what we said, that we're already expensing that
Right.
every year.
Right.
I just didn't understand the language.
So my guess is that there was a differential, that if you were hired prior to 13, 14, you got X, whatever that X is. If you were hired after June 30 of 14, it's the $2,800, and that's what everyone would get from that point forward.
That's what I didn't understand. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Neil?
I'm going to support this contract because of the reasons that we were informed at the John Stark School Board meeting, and I think this also applies to the Weare support staff also.
Stick to one school.
Yeah, I'm speaking about Stark. We can't keep people, we can't hire people at the salaries we're paying. That, to me, is the prime criteria for raising salaries. It's not that we want to pay the average. We don't want to pay something to attract people so that we pay higher than Hopkinton or whatever the town is. We have to pay at least as much money as is necessary to make sure that we're properly staffed. If the pay scale now doesn't do that, and that's what we were told, then it has to be raised. I have no idea whether this raise will do that or not, but certainly that's the justification, in my view, for raising salaries, as opposed to, well, and therefore, I support this.
Tom?
I guess I would echo those sentiments because, as we said earlier, the job market is so tight that there are so many opportunities out there. We see job postings all over the place. And so we're competing with other companies that are offering more for, and I don't mean this as a put down, but some less skilled labor than what it would be for a teacher or whatever. Because your support staff could come in as an untrained person and learn on the job. So that same person could go to a company and who's offering whatever. I don't know what the rates are. I don't have that contract in front of me, but whether it's $12, $15, $10.50 as Dunkin' Donuts is offering, or whatever. So I think that it is necessary in order to keep and add employees to support this contract. Is that as clear as mud? Sorry.
No.
Any other discussion?
No.
Bill?
No, I'll just, on this one, I will say that when we were briefed by Zach, came in, I think he did provide a decent explanation of the same things that have been discussed. And when you look at it in the 1 year, it's less than the magic 100,000 I mentioned in a previous article. I know over 3 years, when you compound it, at the end of 3 years, like Neil said, it does end up being a $292,000 difference from where we're at today, but that's 3 years down the line. So I'm actually supportive of this article. So,
Chris?
Well, I've worked on school contracts, and there's nothing unusual or untoward in this. It's all pretty standard. And we have to keep in mind, this also includes more people than just paraeducators. It's got the custodians and
Kitchen
other,
staff.
yeah, and other people that maintain the operation of the school, so.
Is there any more discussion? If not, we will go ahead and ask the question, are you ready to vote?
Yes.
Okay. The question before us is to recommend Article 4. If you are in favor of recommending this article, please raise your hand.
okay, 9. No, I'm sorry,
11.
11. My math is off. Okay.
Is that ghost in the room again?
Yeah, okay.
He's going to be voting for full-day kindergarten.
What's that?
Okay, if you are opposed, please raise your hand.
Oh, you're, okay, okay. One,
We'll see.
I'm abstaining.
okay. 11-1-1. Got it.
Okay. Moving along, the article passes. We will now consider the next article.
Article 5, shall the John Stark School District vote to raise and appropriate the amount of $28,353 for the cost of 1/3 of a school resource officer to be divided among the Weare School District, the John Stark Regional School District, and the town of Weare.
I have a suggestion to make regarding this. We have the same thing on the, maybe not the same wording exactly as far as numbers, but on the Weare School District and then on the town warrant as well. We also have on the town warrant an article for an additional police officer. I think that my suggestion would be that we put a hold, and when we get to that point, we make the decision regarding the,
All three of them
yeah,
on the SRO?
yeah.
I,
Because I think that there's a discussion to be had between SRO and full-time police officer. That's why I say that.
Well, didn't Neil say we could come back to it?
You certainly can, but
go ahead, Neil.
I'd prefer to deal with this on a case-by-case, a warrant-by-warrant basis, and not do it all at once. And to some extent, that's because I've looked at those articles and I have an opinion on them, and I know how I'm going to vote on them. And I suspect most of us do also. If it turns out, and I would be surprised, but if it turns out that we vote in favor of the school resource officer in warrant A, but not in warrant B, there's something wrong with us. So,
Keith, did you want to say something?
I wanted to read what he's saying.
Any other comments? Then I think we're going to continue sticking to the warrant articles for this school and get this school done. Any objections? Okay. Any comments, discussion?
Only what I already said.
Well, I'll just say how I feel. School resource officer, I think the chief explained it well when he came in, that it's not a school safety officer. He's not there to prevent incidents. He's there as another resource to develop a rapport with certain students. He gave a vivid example of that as well. There were a lot of questions we asked on does he need a cruiser and this and that. However, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of there are a lot of resources in the schools now. Mm-hmm. We have psychologist staff. Each teacher develops a rapport. They know their students better than everyone else. This is layered. It would be another person. When I asked, it was a joint effort between the police chief and the SAU. I think Lorraine said that. To develop this. However, our current police chief is going to be leaving at the end of April. I don't know what the new police chief is going to feel about a school resource officer. And not only school resource officer, but full-time officer, additional cruiser, what type of cruiser. So I'm of the opinion that when we come to articles which refer to the police department, that we ought to take a pause and we ought to let the new police chief come in when he's hired this next year and develop his own ideas of force laydown. Do we need a school resource officer? So I'm not inclined to support it.
Tom?
The reason that I made that suggestion to begin with is because when we get to the town budget, I will argue in support of an additional officer because
But that's not now.
I know, but I'm
Okay.
just giving my reasoning for now, okay? The reasoning down there is of weighing, in my mind, do we need coverage from 3:30 in the morning to 7? and weighing that against the school resource officer. So, you know, if I were to make a choice, I would choose the round-the-clock coverage for local coverage. So I'm not against school resource officers, but I will vote nay on this because I'm going to strongly push for the other when we come to it. And I don't think we're going to be able to do both.
Go ahead, Tammy.
I heard Chief Kelly's explanation of why we need a resource officer, and at the beginning of the discussion, when I heard the schools and everybody talk about it, I was very much on the fence about this issue. But ever since hearing, like, the police chief actually explain his reasoning behind it, as a parent, I think that students should have an officer to go to should there be a problem like that at home. Hearing that there's a problem with child pornography in open cases in this town, that worries me for the children in this town. I think they should have someone to go to. I support what the chief has put forward. I think he's done a fantastic job in his position, and I support his recommendation.
Neil?
I agree with Bill. The kinds of services that this person is going to provide are the kinds of services that should be provided by the schools. Yes, there can always be occasion where another person coming into the school, whether an officer or some other specialist, could be another resource. But balancing the availability of existing resources and the cost of this resource to the community, in my judgment, there are many more important expenses. So I will be voting against recommending this.
I'm against the SRO for several reasons. First and foremost, there are no facts and figures for, in this town, needing it. But more importantly, we have staff in the schools that are supposed to be able to handle this. I do not believe that I should have to put a police officer to provide another layer or in somebody's home because we have this issue. Child pornography is a terrible thing. Molestation is a terrible thing. Murder is a terrible thing. Every crime is a terrible thing. But the fact of the matter is, we cannot provide a policeman for everybody 24/7 in this town. We have to understand that the schools have said they needed these extra people, and they were in place so the children had people to talk to. If these people cannot cover that, and now we have to add a resource officer to it, then I would like to have those people removed, because it comes under the heading, either they can do the job or they can't. If you're telling me that they can't go to the principal, the vice principal, their teachers, the other people we have on staff that are qualified, that have degrees, that we've paid for to get their degrees, that we give raises to because they're necessary to keep because they do all these wonderful things, that now I have to put a policeman in here, that particularly bothers me incredibly. The other thing for me is the cost of a police officer is a very big cost. And to date, we have not got a full staff police department in this town. Children are important. Everybody is important. And I am not willing to sacrifice an entire town for an issue such as that. It's terrible, yes, but the fact of the matter is we pay taxes to the state for social services. And those people are supposed to be called by the people who observe them, neighbors, people at school, and told that's what social services is for. I'm not here to pay for another layer of social services in the schools. So while I heard what the chief said, I am not in favor of this at this time. Any more discussion? Tom?
Yeah, I just want to emphasize my point of view on this because I do believe in school resource officers. I just don't believe the town is going to hire a school resource officer and a full-time officer in the same year. And I'm going to put my energy into trying to convince all of you to hire the full-time police officer rather than the...
One thing I want to make sure everybody understands on this committee, everybody is entitled to have an opinion, but at no time do we hammer on anybody else to change their opinions. That's the way this goes.
I think Tom said that in jest.
I know
with
he
a big
did.
smile on his face.
I know. He's good that way.
I don't carry a hammer.
It's those thumb screws you've got,
Although
Tom.
I have had occasion to have a mallet in my hand.
That'd be a big hammer.
Okay, is there, Dennis, go ahead. Dennis?
So, I think you're right. I think the chief did make a really good case the other night. That perhaps there is a need. My concern is that he's not utilizing, even though we have limited resources, he's not utilizing those resources properly. I always found it, if there's a problem, then you go to work on that problem and you utilize the resources that you have for that problem. I've been lucky. I usually work out of town, but I've been in town the past few days. And there was a patrol car parked on the side of the road just watching for speeders for 6 hours today because I went through town 3 times and he moved 3 different places. And so I'm not saying that that officer was doing anything wrong in a sense, but he could have spent 2 hours meeting with students or 3 hours with students and still been on patrol, and if there was a call or what have you. I just think that maybe there's other ways where we can get creative and utilize the officers that we have and still meet the needs. Because what's more important? Trying to meet with some of these students and, meeting with, and same thing with the community. Getting out, meeting the community, they're your biggest real resource, and I don't think the police department has done a good job with that. I think they've really been a brick wall. And not against the officers, I just think that perhaps with a new police chief, he'll be a little more creative with his resources to help resolve some of these problems. So right now, I'm against the SRO. So, and that's based on my opinion of what I see.
Any more discussion?
Yeah, going back a few years ago when
Whoops.
Chief Tothill was here, he used to do that himself. Amongst supervising the department, everything was like clockwork. And also when Greg Began was the chief, he used to go up and do the traffic at the high school in the morning. And at the end of the day, he'd be there doing traffic. And he was open to talking with the kids if they were driving out or riding out with a friend or something, and they stopped, he'd take care of whatever it was. That's the responsibility of the police department, to take those cases of those children to the proper authorities, wherever it is, whoever it is, in the social services in Concord.
If there's no more discussion, are we ready to vote? Okay. Where'd we go? The question before us is to recommend Article 5.
I'm not gonna find it on that sheet.
Oh, thank you.
That's Neil's sheet.
Oh, that's Neil's sheet is messing me up.
There you
Bad
go.
Neil. Bad Neil.
Want my glasses too?
If you are in favor of recommending this article, please raise your hand. If you are opposed, please raise your hand.
Okay, we got
You got this?
12.
Yeah, I'm gonna, Laurie, I'm gonna abstain.
And
Oh, I'm
Donna's.
sorry, I'm sorry.
That's all right, Bill.
Donna hides in the corner down there. Okay, so we got 11.
11, 1, and 1.
Well, 111.
Yeah, sorry.
1, 11, 1. Failed.
Okay.
Just a point of order, do you reverse it now?
Yes,
Yep.
yes, that's where I'm getting to. I have to find this on the sheet of paper, otherwise I'll botch it up again. So now, according to this, Neil, let me know if I'm getting this right. Recommend to not,
The motion before us is to not recommend Article 5.
all in favor of not recommending Article 5, raise your hand.
Now we got 1, 2, 3, 4.
It's the same.
Saying, well, okay, you get a good view of that end of the table.
I can see
Donna's
Donna.
still abstaining.
Yeah.
And we have one that's for.
Having 1-1 then. Oh, okay.
Okay, so the motion,
You should call the other two. Finish the vote.
well, I asked Donna if she
I
abstained. She
abstained.
said yes.
Yes,
Yes.
abstained.
No.
Okay. Oh, Tammy?
Yes, she voted no.
Tammy's a
Yes, I voted
Tammy's a yeah. Tammy's no to the not recommended. There we go. So-
Okay, so Neil, how do I say this
So
in
the motion,
English?
the motion to not recommend passes, and we will not recommend this article.
Okay. You got that?
I got it. I got
Okay.
it. I got it.
We will now move on to Article 6. Neil?
Article 6, shall the John Stark School District vote to raise and appropriate up to the amount of $30,000 of any surplus remaining at the close of the current fiscal year to be added to the John Stark School District Special Education Expendable Trust Fund previously established in March 2012 for the purpose of meeting the expense of unanticipated special education costs.
Discussion.
I can start this one off. We've got a good deal of money in this account already, enough to take care of, most likely to take care of any emergency. A very expensive special ed student coming into the district. The reason why I don't favor this is not just because the trust fund or the expendable trust has enough or an adequate amount of money in it, but I think there are more pressing needs elsewhere in the budget that would cause me not to want to support this. If we put $30,000 of surplus in here, it's not that it's free. It's just $30,000 that won't roll over to reduce tax rates. So if we, quote, spend it by putting it, if you spend surplus by putting it in here, the tax rate goes up. If we don't spend it, then we can either let it roll back to lower taxes or spend it for something else in other articles. And there are so many important things here, more important things in this budget than putting another $30,000 into this education trust fund, special education trust fund, that I can't support it. Not one of my priorities.
Tom?
I have a question, really. Maybe you have the answer to it as far as, you said there's a lot of money already in there. What is a lot?
I thought there was around 200,000, but if you want to ask Lorraine.
Yeah, I would like to ask that, and also a question on when you have an out-of-district placement, what does that generally cost?
I think it was about 250, if it's a real expensive out-of-district placement, but I'm
Neil's,
sure that.
no, you're Neil. She's Lorraine. Lorraine's going to give us some accurate figures.
The amount that's currently in that is 171,000 and change, which was why we were asking for the 30 to bring it up to about 200,000. An out-of-district residential placement is about $250,000. In another district, not John Stark, but in another district in our SAU, we just had a move-in. That move-in's transportation for half a year, the transportation is $46,000, and the tuition for a half a year is $27,000. So you have two students move in, the 171 will not cover it. The 200 may not even cover it, but we're trying to incrementally build that up.
Madam Chairman, I heard
Neil?
a little bit of editorializing there.
Yes.
It's true.
Just stick to the facts. Okay.
Can I just ask, do we have any placements right now, or no, we're not utilizing that fund at all right now?
We have out-of-district placements that we knew about and were budgeted for. This is for unanticipated.
So the answer is no. And we have not expended out of this fund for several years.
Correct.
This is.
Lorraine, do you mind going back up there, please?
I may not have that answer.
I know, but we'll try. At the presentation I was at, there was money expended out of this fund. They took 25, 30,000 out of here.
Thank you, Neil.
And
I swear, Lorraine, I did not put her up to this.
Because I know that question came up
I'll
and
get
that
yelled
they
at
had.
for
they
editorializing
had
if I
said that
disagree with you.
They did take it out?
No, we did not take any out.
Okay, so nothing has been,
Nothing has been expended.
good, thank you. Any more discussion? Okay, are we ready for a vote? I'm going to say yes because nobody's saying anything. So, the question before us is to recommend Article 6. If you are in favor of recommending Article 6, please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Sorry, Donna, we have to keep looking around the corner for you.
4? Yeah, I got 4. I said 4. 1, 2, 4's right. Okay.
Raise your hands if you are now opposed.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's right, that's 13.
The numbers add up.
So it fails.
This article fails. So now we're going to, Neil, you get to do this again because you're really good at it.
The motion before us is to not recommend Article 6. If you're in favor of not recommending Article 6, you'll vote yes. If you oppose that, you'll vote no. All those in favor of not recommending Article 6, please raise your hands.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10? Did you change?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Try to keep me on my toes. Okay, that's 10. Okay.
All those opposed to not recommending.
3. Okay, nobody's voting twice. That's good. Okay.
Yeah.
We now turn to Articles.
No, you need,
The motion carried, and the committee will not recommend Article 6.
What was the count?
What was the count?
The count was
10-3.
10-3.
10-3, yep. As opposed to
Your
10.
voice is giving out?
yes, please.
We now turn to Article 7. Shall the John Stark School District vote to establish a John Stark Regional School District Expendable Trust Fund under the provisions of RSA 31:19A for the purpose of capital improvements, and to raise and appropriate up to the amount of $200,000 of any surplus remaining at the close of the current fiscal year to be added in this fund. Further, to name the John Stark Regional School Board as agents to expend from said fund after conducting a noticed public hearing. Discussion.
Go ahead.
Bill?
I didn't see any other raised hands. I'm not in support of this one because it's not specific, project specific. When the town does this and they want to get money removed to put in such as the government buildings one, it's designed for a specific item like the bell tower, or in this year it says we're gonna, if we get this money put in, it's gonna be put into the roof on the public safety building. This is, as I remember it being briefed to us, was it would be 200,000 out of leftover funds. Instead of being returned to offset taxes, it would be, if up to 200,000 would be put into this account as to be spent on projects which are listed in the next 10 years, but they can change at any given time. So it's not project specific, it's just 200,000 into that reserve fund to then be used as the board deems fit. And I think it should be project specific, so the voters have more of a say, and it's not look like, it doesn't have the appearance of being just a rainy day fund for projects.
Thanks.
So are the funds have to be spent by?
Dennis.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I apologize.
No, Neil's doing the calling.
So would the funds have to be appropriated by vote by the town?
Once the money is in the fund,
Once it's in the fund, it's.
they hold a public hearing, and then they do what they want.
Okay.
I would like to say attending the school board meetings, this is a very well thought out plan. They've done a lot of research. They have a 10-year plan with projects listed, and I'm going to trust that, I mean, if something needs to be moved up, I would want them to do that. Excuse me, Lori's catching. But I trust the plan that they have in place. I think they did a lot of work, and it's important. I don't like to be hit with the high-cost items, so I like capital improvement plans.
Further discussion, Tom?
If you compare to the town government building and maintenance fund, it actually comes in two different ways. Bill, you're right, this year and last year there was a specific project, but if you recall, I think last year, that there was also a set amount that was separate from that there was a project of the bell tower, and then there was an addition of, maybe I have my years wrong, but there was an additional amount to bring it up to a standing balance for emergency situations, like a boiler that goes, or a major expense that's a maintenance item. So it can go either way. The similarity is that in this case, the Board of Selectmen had the say on where to spend it and on what. And in this case, it would be the John Stark Regional School Board. The difference is that with the government building maintenance funds, it doesn't need a public hearing. This has that extra level of protection where it does ask for a public hearing as well. I think it's important to establish a fund such as this for the schools, either Weare or John Stark. Whether that amount is the appropriate amount to start the fund with, I guess is up for discussion, but I think that it's a sensible fund to have, because you don't, even with a plan, you don't know what's going to come up.
Chris?
Just as a point of information, this, when it was presented, the school board has a facilities committee that studied what they want to do in year 1, year 2, year 3. So it does come with some research and a plan. It just is not in the language of the warrant article, but a plan is available if someone wanted to see what they have. And I believe some of it, for starters, is drainage, because they're having drainage issues with their fields and whatnot, and that would be the first project, and then they go from there, and they do. And as Tom said, sometimes there's a contingency that if something flooded or whatever. So it is thought through by that committee. That's how they presented it to us.
Lori? If you want to write it out, I'll read it.
I have an aversion to putting money in accounts that can be moved around from project to project. While I have a trust with certain people on the board, these boards change. This money accrues. But more importantly, you have to look at the expenditures, and they've just recently established this facilities committee, and they've just recently put this out as far as how they want to timeline it. My CIP committee for the town asks me every year for money for a specific project. I do not like giving people blank checks. I have found on more than one occasion that trust has been misplaced in the schools, and I cannot feel comfortable with this.
Further discussion? Keith?
Well, I generally do support capital improvement plans. I don't think it is well thought out. It's quite a spreadsheet. But I don't think it's really well thought out. They kind of threw it together over the last few months. But just to give an idea of what they have planned, or what they've written down for the next school year. And drainage is not one of the things on there. The part of the roof is part of it, and that's actually, roof is actually staged out over like 8 or 9 years. And I'm guessing that's a pretty serious problem. But then you got generator panel and lines, irrigation, sewer, and septic. Generator panel lines, 30,000. Irrigation, sewer, septic, 4,000. Cafe tables, 25,000. Emergency road and gate, 40,000. Field access roads, 20,000. Repave the driveway, parking lots, striping, guardrails, 60,000. Replace the fiber, which I think is about the network, about 6,000. And gigabit speed switches, which is also part of the network, 5,000. So, and then 30 amp power and halon for their IDF closets, maybe something to do with fire extinguishing. So I'd like to see them do a better job next year and then actually sell it. They don't have to necessarily put in the warrant that they're going to expend it on certain things, but I certainly think they ought to at least give the townspeople a clear idea of what their priorities are. Like the roof, I imagine it's probably a pretty high one, but it's not clear from this list. So I'm not supporting it at this point.
Tom?
I just was going to emphasize that it does say capital improvements. So it can't just be moved around for anything. It has to be for a capital improvement.
Right.
Some of the things that Keith read, I do wonder about, though, is whether those are capital improvements. Certainly the roof, there's no doubt about it, and some of the others. There are a couple on there that I probably should be in the budget. But in general, I support the concept.
Further discussion? There being none, are you ready for the question? If you're in favor of recommending Article 7, the Capital Expense Trust, please raise your hand. If you're in favor of recommending it. We have one. If you're opposed to recommending it, please raise your hand. We have 12. The motion fails. The motion before us now is to not recommend this article. I'm sorry?
I abstained.
You did. Okay.
Yeah, I'd have to look at that list again.
So the vote then
I would
was
111-1.
I like the concept, so.
1 in favor, 11 opposed, and 1 abstention. The motion did fail. The question before us now is not recommend. If you're in favor of not recommending this article, please now raise your hand. If you're opposed to that motion, please raise your hand. If you're abstaining, please raise your hand.
Okay.
11 in favor, 1 opposed.
11-1-1.
Yes. And that completes our business with respect to the John Stark warrant articles. And at this point, we now turn to the Weare Schools budget.
Do you have more copies of this one article? Of the Weare School?
This is the document that I have.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's not like the town, it's
I have another one. I think this is.
I don't think I have it where you can read them off.
How many people do not have a copy of this?
Yep, I don't.
Does anybody know how to work that machine?
I can figure it out. Where's the machine?
think I got it too.
Oh, thank you.
When I looked today, I was a little softer on my
If
wear.
anybody knows, Naomi, that's,
Should be the same. 28,
Wait a minute.
change, but that's what I had.
Oh, that's different.
Chris, may I have your copy? Got it. Okay. The first article deals with reports of agents. The second article deals with salaries of the school board. We don't opine on those, but the first article that affects us is Article 3, the budget article. Shall the Weare School District raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special or separate warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth on the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by vote of the first session for the purposes set forth therein totaling $15,307,048. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $15,185,899, which is the same as last year with certain adjustments required by previous action of the district or by law, or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 40:13, 10, and 16 to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only.
Okay.
Thank you.
I came prepared.
Thank you, Naomi. Discussion. James.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and just put out, I'm gonna support this. I think we've spent too many years on default budgets, and while, yes, default budgets are less expensive, as much as I don't like to spend much money either, I just think as a general principle, we need to do a little bit better and on supporting all of our budgets. I think the folks that are putting these things together spend a fair amount of time doing this, and I'd like to trust them. But at the same time, just like philosophically, I think we need to support more budgets and not just rely on default budgets all the time.
Further discussion. Chris?
Weare has had 16 default budgets, the town of Weare. There have not been that many in the school. I don't know the number, but Weare has had 16 since, I think I've got the number, 1998, I believe.
That's for the town?
Yeah,
That's
for the town.
But still.
Yeah, so.
Further discussion. Tom?
If you recall, when we first set in for the school department, school board presentation, not the public hearing, but the first presentation to this committee, there was a lot of technology in the budget, which they made a strong case as far as being needed. They really also emphasized the need for passing Article 4, which is the article for the teacher's contract. And so when they went back, the school department went back and did some revisions. They cut quite a chunk out of their budget in order to have this group support not only the budget but also the contract. And I think with that effort that we ought to do just that I certainly would lend support to this article. And I know I'm ahead of the game here looking at Article 4, but also the two are tied together because they were tied together in the thinking of the board and the SAU when they went back and did revisions to the original budget.
Let me add to that. I was at the school board meeting where I, among others, asked the school board to make some tough decisions, what they really supported. And none of the school board members responded, perhaps appropriately, but the superintendent did. And she made it very clear that in order to operate this school, they need those two contracts, the salary contract for the teachers and for the support staff. Same argument for the support staff as John Stark. They're losing people, they can't retain them, and they can't hire them. As far as the teachers' contract was concerned, there were the same kind of issues. We have an extraordinarily large proportion, and I don't remember the numbers, of under 5-year teachers here. We're a training ground. We spend a lot of time and money. Some kids suffer as a result of that, and then the teachers go elsewhere for more money. It is imperative, according to Lorraine, and she made the case strongly, that those two pass. And in order to do that, this is what Tom was saying, she persuaded the school board, and God only knows how she did it, to reduce an already modest proposal for an increase down to a 1.11% increase. That's extraordinary. Because it's so important to them that they get out from under the default budget. I think they're operating under a default budget dating back to 16-17. That they get out of that, but more importantly, that they have the teachers' contracts, that they made very difficult decisions. And I, for one, will support this. The total of these three is less than 2.8% increase in the budget. In this time, I think it's time we get out of a default contract for the Weare schools, but more importantly, I think it's time that we paid people enough so that we don't lose them. We can't afford that.
I'll just add that the slides that the Weare School District did, that they said, like, these are the difference between the proposed and the default. And the majority of the difference, it was $47,000 of their $121,000 was like health insurance, dental, retirement, things that they don't really have control over. You just like you can't decide where you're going to pay for health insurance. They tell you, you know, electricity, and then another $44,000 was things like electricity, fuel. Just like you have no control over what Eversource charges you. So that's a total of $91,000 of their $121,000 difference between the budget default and the budget proposed. Like, they really are, as I say in my regular job, there's no fat to cut. Like, they have done it. At least in my view and what they presented, like, they are presenting a fiscally responsible budget.
Further discussion. Bill?
Yeah, just to throw it out here, though. When you look at those fixed costs, you know, health insurance and everything gets built in. When we do redo contracts, we find that there's no changes to health insurance. So it compounds a problem years down the pike, which is coming in the next article. Nothing was given in those areas. So,
but just to I think, believe that Lorraine had said that in the contracts, because we're trying to keep our employees, that what we are paying compared to what they are paying is on par, correct?
yeah, don't miss it. Don't no. What I'm saying is, don't misinterpret how I feel about the next next item.
And that there's a lot of discussion about the contracts, which is not what we're discussing.
Yeah,
we're discussing the budget.
Yeah, the budget. Yeah.
In my opinion, and just again, I said earlier with John Stark as well, there are easily $60,000 higher in the default line items in the default than in the proposed. So that's something they're saying, we can do it for 3, but we had 5 last year and we're keeping the 5. I don't do that, and that's leaving out 21.5 for the propane, I believe. And those are estimates. In the last several years, we've given away unused. The surplus was $500,000 at the end of the year. The difference in the budget is 122.23. Worst case, and if you took away, in my opinion, the 60, we're going to cover it. And when I hear default budget, when it's a default budget and you come up with $500,000 at the end of the year, it's hard for the voters to understand that. So it's easy for them to vote for another default. Oh, they did well with the default. They had too much, which isn't necessarily the case because they cut back on things. But I'm not in favor of the budget because I think the teachers and the support staff are very important, and I think they could get by on a default this year.
I think that there's another connection here that we have to look at when you talk about surplus, and that is the very fact that they lose teachers. They've lost that experience, but in a sense, it creates a surplus because when they have to hire new teachers, they could come in at a lower rate. So they've lost the experienced teachers, but they've saved money. I'm not saying that's a good thing because they need the experience level, but that is probably one of the explanations for having a surplus at the end of the year because of that change in staff that creates the surplus. But in the process, you've lost the experience level of your staff.
I think there are many reasons why a surplus is created that are not related to over-budgeting. Moreover, if there is a surplus, the taxpayers get it back because in the schools, if it isn't spent, it goes in the fall to reduce taxes. So whatever surplus they have left over next June, this coming June, will offset whatever taxes we approve or whatever budget we approve for the next year. Unlike the town, where the surplus goes to the town and doesn't go back to the taxpayers unless the selectmen make a determination. In the case of the schools, it does.
They had some wiggle, if you get a default in March, you can spend in April and still fall under the guidelines because you've used it long enough in the school year. So some will get used on things that were in the proposed that was shot down.
Games can be played, of course, of course.
I'm just saying, you know.
Further discussion? There being none, are you ready for the question? The motion before us is to recommend this article. If you're in favor of recommending Article 3, the school budget for Weare, please now indicate by raising your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
10 in favor. If you are opposed to that motion, please raise your hand. 3. The motion carries 10-3, and our recommendation we will recommend Article 3. We now turn to Article 4.
Do we have to do the reverse vote?
No,
No, not
because
on
that
one,
passed.
Because it passed.
Have an affirmative vote. Article 4, shall the Weare School District vote to approve the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the Weare School Board and the Weare Education Association, which calls for the following increases in salaries and benefits at the current staffing levels over those paid in the prior fiscal year. In year 2019-20, $206,785. In 2020 to 2021, $239,520. And I will soon add up the Campana total. Discussion. Tom?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot said in support of this, and when we tied the two together and saw what, as you, Neil, noted, the total cost, including the contracts, was a reasonable percentage increase. Just to emphasize, besides losing the teacher that has experience and getting a new teacher that's less experienced when a turnover occurs.
First year's doubled.
You also lose the training that you've already given that person. For example, the writing program in the elementary school was mentioned. People don't come in knowing about that. There's in-house training that trains teachers to do a certain program, like it was called, I think, the Lucy Calkins writing program. In the upper elementary, they have the responsive classroom, which is basically a program to teach kids how you want them to behave and to help them get along with each other. But that, too, requires quite a bit of in-house training. So when you lose a staff member, they take that with them, and the new person coming in doesn't have it. So it leaves a gap in the training of the staff. So that's another reason that I see here to support this contract, so we don't see that training go out the window. Well, probably they leave by the door, but you know what I mean.
Further discussion. Bill?
Yeah, I support this one because I remember when we were briefed by the superintendent, and we all said, what's your highest priorities? And it was like crickets. And then she stepped forward and said, I can break pencils if I have to, but I need teachers. And I can't get teachers hired, and I can't keep them unless we're more competitive with the towns around us. So it's a no-brainer to me.
Further discussion. There being none, are you ready for the question? Yes. The total of this contract over 2 years, will be $653,090.
It's about 3 plow
206,000.
No,
that's a realistic way to look at it.
It's about 3 plow trucks, yeah. But plow trucks don't teach students.
No.
So,
Get the students there.
well,
However, in order to have drivers for those plow trucks.
We don't need students.
okay.
Okay.
Vote taxpayers later on to pay for those plow trucks.
The motion before us is on Article 4, the teacher's contract. And if you're in favor of recommending the teacher's contract, please now raise your hand. 12 in favor. If you're opposed, 1. The motion carries 12-1. and we will recommend this article to the voters. We now turn to Article 5, the support staff contract. Shall the Weare School District vote to approve the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the Weare School Board and the Weare Education Support Staff, which calls for the following increases in salaries and benefits at the current staffing levels over those paid in the prior fiscal year. In the year 2019 to 20, $44,592. In 2021, $34,498. In 2021-22, $34,222. And we're going to get a number shortly. And further raise and appropriate the sum of $44,592 for the school year 1920, such sum representing the additional costs attributable to the increase in salaries and benefits over those of the appropriation and current staffing levels. Discussion. Good. Are you ready for the... Bill.
Well, not quite as quick, no.
3 times the first
No,
year,
that's
2
what I did.
times the second year.
That's
and
what I
once-
did.
Okay.
It's 3 times.
No, and
It's 3 times, and then I was gonna add them all on.
Got it.
I understand what was
Give me the number.
said about the need for people and budgets, and we didn't have a teacher's contract. We only had one contract at John Stark, and that passed our committee. We have a teacher's contract here, and this contract, and the op budget, and when they start stacking up in this particular year, I'm not in favor of this, because I think the teachers are more important, and on balance, I think if we're going to approve the op budget and the teacher's contract, that's the first line of defense, but I can't add the paras with it.
Even though the total increase is 2.8% for the 3 articles?
I'm not worried about the percent. I don't get hung up on that.
Does it matter to you that,
It matters.
while it's important that the teachers be in class, it's also important that the school lunches be served, that paraprofessionals be there?
Neil, don't lobby.
No, I don't, I think the teachers are the first line of defense, and I think that contract is important, and after 3 years, it's gonna cost us over $600,000 compared to, after 2 years, it's gonna cost us over $600,000, 3 plow trucks to what it's compared to today.
But
And I'm not gonna support adding the paras, because I think, as difficult as it may be, I think the teachers have the higher priority, and I can't start loading in everything in the same year.
The total, just so I can announce it, is $236,994 for 3 years.
1 plow truck.
$236,994.
4 plow trucks.
No, well, for this particular.
He's voted for 3 plow trucks. He's
And now
he's
this
having
is
a
number
problem with
4.
the 4th. Susan?
Yeah, I don't know if
A 6-wheeler.
there's, cafe staff is in the Weare district, it's just the paras. But that being said, the paras in the Weare School District, they are more than babysitters. They're trained to help with either the language arts or the math, and they're taking extra training. They are another line. We're not going for an SRO officer. They are somebody else in a classroom with a lot of kids, a lot of issues. I think when my kids were going, I had that opinion. It was like, wow, that's a lot of paras in the classroom. And what I saw, I don't want to say it was babysitting, but I thought it was more. But today, I think it's a different model, and I think there's some value there. And given
Thank you for correcting me,
cost.
Chris. This contract covers paras and not
That's right.
the other staff.
That's
That's in
right.
the Stark
Yeah,
contract.
that's correct.
Thank you.
Well, first I'll
Further
say,
discussion, Chris?
I am married to an ex-para. He did 11 years. After his professional career, he said, I'm going to go get another job, and he did. And they have a certification program, which he easily got. And he said that with the relationship he had with the teacher, he was a co-teacher, not just for the kids he was assigned to, but for the kids who needed help, whatever kids. So that's that. I do have a question. There's on section 9.9, at the age of 55, if you retire, I realize they're not eligible for the state retirement system. So this may be just a benefit put in that was negotiated. 15 to 19 years of service, $2,000, and 20 plus years, $5,000. And, you know, even though my husband loved his job, 20 plus years is a long time, and I didn't know if anybody has reached that length in our system.
Would you want an answer to that? Because that's a factual question.
Yeah, that's a factual question. I just wondered if there's anybody close.
But I think it helps get.
Yes.
Lorraine?
Microphone.
I mean, yes.
No, there.
That's a lot of work.
Yes, there are people who are approaching that level of service.
How many?
I do not have that number.
1, 5?
I would guess 2. All right.
And is this a one-time payment?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for their service
Thank you
for
for their
20 years,
service. Yes.
$2,000.
Further discussion? Are you ready for the, Tom?
No, just the same discussion really we had when we were talking about the para contract for the high school, and that is that you really are with these employees competing with the private sector in a full employment environment. And that's where I think I'm the one who tossed out at one of the public hearings the $10.50 an hour Dunkin' Donuts, because the beginning para, the non-certified beginning para in this new contract makes $11.01 an hour. So, you really are competing with some fairly basic jobs out there in retail in order to get people to come in and really paraprofessional. You want them to have some of the skills of a professional, and yet the pay is not the greatest. So I think that there is a competitive market there, and we need to at least support the contract as it is in order to be able to fill these slots. And they're beyond being, in the case of co-teachers in some case, there are many, many instances where they are simply needed in special education programs because a given child might not be able to survive in the school environment without that para.
Further discussion? There being none, are you ready for the question? The motion before us is to recommend Article 5, the support staff contract. If you're in favor of recommending Article 5, please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
No, I got 10.
I have trouble counting. If you got 10, you got,
I
yeah,
see.
you got 10.
Okay.
10.
10 voted in the affirmative. All those opposed to recommending? Those abstaining?
Greg, are you voting?
I did the first time.
You did?
Yeah.
So it's 11 then? Okay, you voted yes?
No, I voted no.
The first time was yes. Okay, let's try this again.
Okay.
Raise your hand high.
If you're in favor of recommending Article 5, the support staff contract, please raise your hand and hold it high until it's counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If you're opposed, please raise your hand. 3.
Okay.
The motion passes 10-3, and we will recommend Article 5. We now turn to Article 6, full-day kindergarten. Shall the Weare School District vote to raise and appropriate the amount of $251,000 for the expansion of the current kindergarten program to a full-day program for the fall of 2019. Revenue in the amount of $114,400 is anticipated from adequacy funding to offset this amount. Discussion.
Somebody else can jump in first.
Are you ready for the question? Tom?
Well, this full-day kindergarten concept has been supported by the governor, the legislature, the State Board of Education. 90% of the districts in the state have a full-day kindergarten already. There was an article in the newspaper just within the last 2 weeks, the Concord Monitor, about the town of Epsom, which will have a similar warrant article on their ballot, and it said that they were one of 15 districts in the state that did not have full-day kindergarten, and we would be one of those 15 as well. I think the time is here for this, and that it's important that we that we go ahead. And I do have some personal experience in the sense of my career before retirement. And in the school where I was, we put in full-day kindergarten 13 years ago. So it's not a new concept. It's a concept that's been around and been worked toward in most of the school districts in the state for a long time.
Neil?
Lori?
I'm against it for several reasons. First off, it shows that only the first 2.5 years is of any benefit. But the real fact is, I view this as all-day babysitting. We have terrible test scores. Terrible. And while some people will say test scores are not important, they are important. That's how we judge things. And I do not see the point of adding something else in when we haven't solved the problem of getting the current students up to speed and up to standard. By the time they hit the high school, they're behind the 8 ball. And they cannot bring them up to math standards. They have a terrible time in the high school bringing the middle school people up to standards in math. They cannot do it. The other thing is, they recently just figured out that they are going to be putting the pre-K in the middle school. The playground's over at the grade school. I don't see the point of building yet another one. But more importantly, I don't see a point to putting little children in with the middle school. There comes a whole new issue with this, and that issue is you've got young kids, very little children, that generally have somebody that accompanied them to a bathroom. Now, these classrooms are not going to have bathrooms in them. So now my question is, does a female teacher take a male child into the female bathroom over at the middle school? Does a male teacher take a female child? How many people do we have around for this? I'm not comfortable with that, but more importantly, I think we need to clean up the other thing of getting our current students up to speed. Then we come to the other issue. We're taking the music room, which we had to have. We had to have a music room and an art room because they needed it to be designated. That was a big push a couple years ago. We had to have these classrooms. And now we're taking the music room away. And with further discussion, listening to the school board, and Sue was on the committee. She gave us a lot of valuable information. It's going to be up and down as to whether or not we take the art room in another year or two. And
I wasn't on the kindergarten.
but you have to raise questions about the preparation for this. I don't feel it was well thought out because it all came together in last week was when they figured out where they were going with it. I like to see a very long laid out plan, but more importantly, you have a certain number of students that are already there and we have problems bringing them up to speed. Until that problem is handled, I am not interested in bringing more kids in. I think that's wrong. And I definitely do not want to have, because parents are complaining 2.5 hours is a problem for them. They're your children. That's a commitment you make.
Further discussion?
Sure.
Yeah.
I let everybody
Bill.
talk first. No, I'm not in support of this. I think with everything, I think it's a bad concept to put that in with the other important issues in the same year on the ballot together. I think it puts it in a situation where somebody may just say no to everything when they throw this would tip. It's filling a glass with water, and when you get to it's going to overflow and maybe turn a note on some of these other issues like the teacher's contract. Like Lori said, I think it was not. It's kind of rushed. I much would have rather seen a basic question on the warrant article: is a town in favor of full-day kindergarten this year? And if you got that and it said yes, then proceed on a more orderly plan next year when you don't have a teacher's contract on there and you won't have a para contract on there if they pass, and it would probably stand on its own merit. I would have liked to seen a two-phase approach to that. So I think it's a rush this year. And I'm concerned a little bit, and I trust the SAU and the school board, but I'm a little concerned that by rushing it and putting a pretty bow on it, that it's only going to cost this much this year, that suddenly next year, we're going to have some added costs are going to come in. We're going to need more space, or we're going to take over the music room or the art room. The music room this year, the art room next year. There's going to be these follow-on costs. Nothing's as easy as it first sounds, and I think this is a rush this year.
Further discussion, Chris?
Can
Yeah, I would love to see a strategic plan or a feasibility study for this. But further, I've taught kindergarten, I know the value of it, but when you look at the other warrants, we have safety issues that cost money, and it's an either or. We can't do it all. That's...
Tammy? Oh, no, sorry, Megan, then Tammy.
Okay. As Bill said, I trust the SAU, I trust the teachers and all that, but as I go over the numbers and I ask questions and I talk to friends who know more about education in kindergarten than I do, I feel like they're putting the cart before the horse. I feel like there needs to be more planning. I'm worried about what's going to happen with preschool, because that's a very important part if we're thinking about kindergarten and we want to prepare them well for onward. We also need to think about preschool and those kids. The sentiments about moving around classrooms and putting them in middle school, I just feel like it was very rushed. And not that I'm opposed to full-day kindergarten, I just would like a better plan.
Tammy?
I do agree that it's been rushed, and I don't think that it was well thought out and well planned. While I do think that full-day kindergarten is extremely beneficial to a child, I just don't think that this is the year for it.
Greg?
Those of you that have been in town a long time, if you remember, Mr. Jello was the principal of the whole Weare School District. When my daughter went to first grade, he come up with this big plan to create a readiness program in lieu of first grade, because of the parents that couldn't afford private kindergarten. Both my kids went to Sugar Spike. And he said after the end of that first year, he says, I will never, never, under any conditions, do that again. There's a reason for it. So there are options to that. I paid for my kids to go. Why should I pay for somebody else's kids to go? I mean, I know, what?
I'm sorry, I was just, you finished, and then I just have one comment, and then we're going to go on. Sorry.
There are options, though. So,
Megan?
I just wanted to say, just to put it out there, no parent I have ever talked to feels like kindergarten is daycare, or that they're looking to shortcut on their expenses or anything like that. They're looking to give their child the best education.
Tom?
Just a clarification, Greg, and that is that readiness is a totally different thing than kindergarten. The readiness is an in-between grade, where that it's actually the child who would be starting first grade is held back and goes through a readiness program and starts first grade at 7 years old.
Isn't that what pre-K is?
No.
Usually a readiness program?
They are different, and readiness is, it's sort of, you are right in the sense that it's gone away now. I don't think many districts have a readiness program anymore. But that's what it was. It was even a child who had gone to kindergarten may end up in a readiness class, but it's kind of a defunct program nowadays, which is probably why Mr. Agello said no thanks. But
that was just 1 year it took him to decide that.
I've already given my spiel on this. I do support it. They've got the cost in for the teachers, the paraprofessionals. They know where the rooms are going to be, and now they've decided on the middle school rather than the high school as a placement for the preschoolers. I think that the pieces are there. I see the pieces are there as far as making a program work. Your teachers and your paras are going to be your key people, and that's included in the budget. Yes, they might have music and art on the cart, but the payback here is having a full-day kindergarten program, which I definitely support.
Donna, yes.
I'm concerned about transportation. Are they going to be home on the school buses? Is that been considered? Are we going to be overloaded, which we are on a lot of these buses already? And are we going to need to buy new transportation for these children to go back and forth? Just a question.
Susan, did you want to respond?
Just on transportation?
Yeah.
They would be bused to and from, like all the other students. Because of the change in the scheduling this year, the upper elementary is on the same schedule as the middle school. It made room on the buses for the current year.
For this
You know,
time,
right,
yeah.
The
but-
bus people say that we would have enough, right, for this year, but you don't know hard numbers,
Mhm.
and it'll change.
Thank you.
I just want to clarify, Sue. Are you telling me that we're going to put 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds on a school bus with other children?
No
Oh, I'm sorry,
seatbelts.
no, preschool would not, kindergarten.
Kindergarten.
The 5-year-olds will be with the 6-year-olds.
But no seatbelts.
First graders.
But no
Preschool is-
seatbelts?
No.
It's not stupid.
Right, but school buses have never had seat belts. They're
Not for
supposedly
5-year-olds.
The seats are designed, I mean, yeah, that's
So,
always been.
not for 5 years old. They have car
I mean,
seats.
my kids were
They
the
have
size
car
of a
seats.
5-year-old until they were 10, so, I mean, age is a number, so, I mean, that's.
Some 5-year-olds are
kind
the
of a
size of a
non-issue.
10-year-old.
Yeah.
It's all relative.
Seatbelts.
Anybody else have any thoughts to contribute? Are you ready for the question? The motion before us is to approve Article 6, to recommend Article 6. If you're in favor, that's kindergarten. If you're in favor of recommending Article 6, please now raise your hand. 1. If you're opposed to recommending Article 6, please raise your hand. If you're abstaining, please raise your hand. 1 in favor, 12 in opposition, the motion fails. The motion before us now is to not recommend Article 6. If you're in favor of not recommending Article 6, please now raise your hand. If you're opposed to that motion, please raise your hand. The vote is 12 in favor of not recommending, 1 opposed. The motion passes, and our recommendation will be not recommend Article 6. The vote was 12-1. We now turn to Article 7, the SRO article again, and I will read that. Shall the Weare School District vote to raise and appropriate the amount of $28,353 for the cost of 1/3 of a school resource officer to be divided among the Weare School District, the John Stark Regional School District, and the town of Weare? Discussion. We've had it already. Are we ready to vote? Motion,
I have your
Chris.
notes. Is there more language to be added to that when they finalize the warrant?
My understanding is they're going to put in language which says this article only can pass if it's passed by the other 2 districts, or something to that effect, so that everybody understands that everyone has, all the 3 district voters have to agree, have to vote in the affirmative for any one of the votes to be binding.
Okay, I need to ask Lorraine,
Yeah,
is that
yeah.
true? It needs to be true.
Yeah.
Is, Bill?
I think there's 2 things, okay.
I'm waiting for her answer.
Okay, I'll
Lorraine,
wait.
could you
I'll
come
wait.
up and,
Kathy.
She's been dealing with the warrant.
okay.
The warrant has been approved by DRA as presented.
So, if
That
it's,
will not be, so that sentence which is going to be on the town article
Naomi?
warrant?
I can't speak to the town warrant, but DRA has already approved. The DRA has approved the warrant article as written.
okay, so staying up there, the town doesn't vote for the warrant article.
Right.
Henniker doesn't vote for the warrant article. The high school doesn't get their warrant article. What are you going to do? If this passes for you, what do you plan to do? How do you plan to fund this?
Well, if it gets voted, if it were to get voted in. we
Only
would have-
by you.
Yeah, but they'll still collect, the money will still be
The money would be approved,
approved.
but it wouldn't be spent.
Right. That's right. Because that,
Oh my
that's what you said at a John Stark meeting that came out.
Yes, that's
Oh
correct.
my
Where
God.
you
Yes,
got
that's-
individual articles, so if if that individual one is approved, the money
Then
is
it was,
still
that, those
appropriated.
dollars would be returned in
And
the
then they
following
just,
year.
they sit, they can't be moved around.
That's
And then
correct.
they'll just be put with the unexpended balance to offset taxes
That's
at the end of the year.
correct.
Right.
Are you looking for two, one for Weare, and then
One-
one for Hanukkah? or-
One is,
Not for Hennecker.
Okay.
I stand corrected, then this article is not going to have this additional language. Lori?
I'd like to ask Naomi the same question. Is it in the town warrant article? Because this came up at the town.
Do you have an extra copy?
I mean, ours says that. You have it right in front.
Could you?
I know, but I need you up here, please. Sorry.
Because they can't read at home. We're not done. We had some discussion the other night about changing it. Because it needs an S on school districts and it needs some little more wordsmithing. So we're going back to DRA with a new change to see if they'll approve it.
And what would that change
I
be?
haven't done that yet. I haven't done any changes since on Monday night, we made some changes. We're not done yet, so I'd like to discuss that whole thing a little bit later.
Okay,
Because you're here to do the schools, right?
okay, yes. I'm going to weigh in on this. I'm not comfortable with the schools writing this as it is. I'm not comfortable with them acquiring money for something that if it doesn't go with all three and them hanging on to it and them getting interest for it, I don't like that. I don't think it's right. I think it's a misrepresentation to the taxpayers. It's a way of them to get money that, while it supposedly comes back to the taxpayers, it's still sitting in their coffers until it gets put back, and somewhere they're getting interest off of it. But I think it is a very big misrepresentation. And I think that clause should be in there, and if it's not going to be, I'm not comfortable with this article at all.
Tom?
It's just, you know, it's kind of irrelevant because the majority of the voters are in Weare, the voters for the Weare School District, the voters for the town, and a higher percentage of the John Stark regional voters are in Weare. So it's highly unlikely that people are going to split their vote and one is going to vote yay on the school district and no on the town. I don't know who would do that.
Yeah.
Chris?
I believe that the way it works is that the town of Weare would administer any pay or funds, and the school would then send a reimbursement. So the money isn't going to go into the school budget.
It's got to go somewhere.
It would sit in the town, I think. Naomi could know.
No, it doesn't.
What's going to happen is that if this is approved by the voters in Weare, we will have our taxes raised by $28,000. But the money can't be spent because in order for it to be spent, the other two districts have to vote for it. I'm assuming that one of the other two does not. And therefore, at the end of the year, that money unspent would be put into a special reserve fund for something or returned to the taxpayers.
And the interest that money's accruing, sitting around, it's not a lot of money, I'll grant you that, but it's still money taken from the taxpayers, that those taxpayers could have done something.
I think the school district gets that to the extent they invest
That's
any of
not
these
right.
funds. But I'm not sure, the town may get it. Tom probably knows that, because you make the payments to the school district.
Vote.
Can we vote?
Yeah, I think it's.
Time out.
Naomi?
We just had it's my understanding how it works. It doesn't say that it's gonna be added to the budget. So if 28,000 is okayed at the school, not at the town and what you're charged for is zero. Because our articles say that it's gonna be added to next year's budget. But we can discuss that later, but it's not a new concept.
Okay, folks, I think we're ready to vote.
Can I just clarify
Tom?
something? Really, it's a general
Thank you, Neil.
comment, but on the funds, the taxes all go into account in Weare, and then Weare makes a writes a check, so to speak, to the Weare School District and to the John Stark School District, I think on a monthly basis for them to handle their expenses. So the money is not held by John Stark in a sense there. It's held in Weare accounts, town accounts, and then it's paid out in chunks to the school district in order for them to meet their expenses. It's school district money, it's reserved for the school districts, but it's held by the town until it's paid out. Is it monthly?
I'm not sure how Beth does it, I'd have to ask.
Okay.
Further discussion?
Nope, we got.
Good.
Lorraine would like to speak.
I think it's clarification. It's a clarification. Yeah.
Oh,
Please.
she's armed with a book.
No, I just couldn't put it down, it's too heavy. I just conferred with Kathleen, and to Neil's point, I believe, and we'll check this out with the attorney tomorrow, at the deliberative session, the school board, and I'm speaking for the school board, but I'm sure they would be willing to do this, with an amendment to their own article. They can amend the article, because it's not changing the purpose, to add that sentence. And
Thank you.
I think we can get that done.
Thank you.
Further discussion on Article 7, the SRO. There being none, are you ready for the question? The motion before us is to recommend this article. If you're in favor of recommending this article, please now raise your hand. Thank you. One in favor. If you're opposed, please now raise your hand. If you're abstaining, please now raise your hand. The vote was 1 in favor, 11 against, and 1 abstention. The article fails. The motion fails. The motion now before us is, are you in favor of not recommending this article to voters? If you're in favor of not recommending this article, please raise your hand. Thank you. If you're opposed to that, please raise your hand. And if you're abstaining, please raise your hand. The motion is 11 in favor of not recommendation, 1 not recommending, 1 opposed, and 1 abstention. And so that motion passes, and our recommendation will be not recommended. Madam Chairman, we've completed our business for this evening. Oh, no, I apologize. We have one more article to go. Article 8, the boiler energy article. Article 8, shall the Weare School District vote to authorize the school board to enter into an up to 15-year tax-neutral lease agreement for the installation of up to $865,740 of energy-saving equipment, including a propane boiler, insulation, LED lighting, controls, and transformer upgrades and other improvements, with annual lease payments of approximately $85,000. Such lease payments to be funded from annual energy savings in the operating budget. This lease agreement contains a non-appropriation escape clause. The vendor has guaranteed that the anticipated annual energy savings from the installation of this equipment will be equal to or exceed the amount of the annual lease payments. Discussion. Tom.
If I recall, last year, there was a warrant article for a new boiler at the elementary school.
No, high school.
No.
Elementary school.
Elementary school,
yeah.
No, elementary, Weare School District Elementary. And
On the ballot?
Yes. Last year there was.
yeah, last year. But this group, if I'm correct, recommended against it, and the reason was that you wanted the school district to pursue a program like had been established at the high school through contract. They've gone out and done that, so I think it's really, I feel, a responsibility to support that effort by approving, voting to recommend this article.
Further discussion. There being none, are you ready for the question? The motion is to recommend Article 8. If you're in favor of recommending Article 8, please now raise your hand. If you're opposed, please raise your hand. The motion carries 12-1. And we will so recommend. Madam Chairman, I think that completes our business for this evening. We have finished our recommendations with respect to the Weare schools and the John Stark High School. Did you want to set another meeting date?
No, I just want to get the minutes approved that I sent out yesterday. If everybody's had a chance to read them, if you haven't, we'll do it at the next meeting.
I don't think we've,
Okay,
you all
next
read
meeting.
them?
I read them. I don't
Next
know
meeting.
if anybody else.
I opened it,
Next
I
meeting.
said later, and I forgot.
I deleted it, Bill.
It was titled War and Peace.
Hey, folks, come on, let's conclude this quickly. Naomi.
So, I just have a question. We're closing in on the time frame for the 28th is when it has to be posted. I guess I'm looking to see if maybe we can discuss or not discuss, if we can have I guess if I could listen to you guys, figure out what you want and what you don't want, and if there's an opportunity and a time frame, if I could do the same thing as the school did. I'm not saying I will, but if there's an opportunity for me to do similar to what the SAU did, and maybe if I just heard what your issues were, and see if maybe there's an opportunity for a second round to see if there's support. Like if you're voting against something and I hear why, and I can maybe go back and sharpen the pencil a little bit. I'm just asking.
It's 9:30. We have time to make a preliminary run through the town things.
Because, and thank you, Lori, because what I'd like to do is Monday night is I'd like to, if I hear concern, then I'd like to think about it and maybe take, I'm not guaranteeing, maybe take some opportunity back to the board and say, these are our concerns, is there something we can do? I'm just looking, we don't have to be here till 11, we can just.
Neil,
I haven't gone through the Weare budget.
I know a lot of people have not gone through it, but you've all heard it. And again, this is not a hard vote, but just like we took time with the schools and asked, we can't ask the town. She's got a deadline date of what?
Well, I think they're at the same deadline. I mean, but
okay.
we have one more meeting, which I'll be happy to run up and downstairs on the 28th to make changes.
Okay.
But I'm just, if there's something that's really grilling out there, I know, and Neil Sheets has, you have a few mistakes in your sheet.
Please help me correct them.
I will. So I'm just saying that I just want to know, I don't know if I have an opportunity, but I haven't even heard any discussion. And we had our public hearing Monday night, and I think I had 5 or 6. We didn't have everybody. So we didn't know.
Laurie, may I? So, no,
Naomi.
it's getting late and my brain is shutting off. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Beth, you had said that the warrant articles, that you had some changes to them. Like, if we're going to do a preliminary vote, I would like to have those actual warrant articles. As well as there are 27 articles, and I don't think any of us wants to give an impression one way or the other without at least looking over them and, because I was concentrating on the schools. I would like to then go, and so that I can give you an honest view, and so that we can give
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to just see if I could, so if I could encourage you to meet earlier than later, maybe is all I'm asking. The only changes that we made had nothing to do with the totals, other than the fire department represented you the change. That if it passes, he'd subtract 30 whatever thousand.
Right.
That's really the only thing.
And deleting the $40,000 surplus.
Yeah, but you just don't vote on that one. But I have to add another one. I'm just waiting for, there's maybe 2 that we have to add, and I'm just waiting. One being to establish, I heard from the AG's office, as you all know, the pantry has moved to the basement. So, and we're getting donations, and I'm not gonna blend them. I can't blend them with general fund money. So I'm gonna have to open a general, like a maintenance trust fund, and let the trustees take care of the donation. So I do have to ask that. And then the other thing is we're checking on is there is money left of the department DPW garage bond that we borrowed. So it's my understanding that we have to ask to close it and put it back in the general fund. So those are two things that I'm still waiting on. But generally, most everything is not going to change. So I would just like an opportunity if you could meet, even if we met Monday and you guys met, I don't know, Wednesday, I'm just throwing it out there. I could listen to your concerns with an opportunity to maybe.
So next Wednesday, you would be good with
See,
it.
the trouble I have is if I go back and make some changes, they sign it on the 28th, that's gonna force you to meet again before deliberative session, because if I make changes that may gain your support, then I'm kinda card sharking right now.
Neil, you need to.
I'm just asking, I'm looking to try to do something
at
together.
At the out budget in particular, or warrant articles?
I guess, I mean,
More the
from what I
budget.
heard,
Well, the budget.
yeah, what I
budget
heard,
problem.
they took, if I'm not mistaken, the operating budget
Oh, they went, yeah.
and some,
they
I'll
went-
call ours wage differentials of existing staff. So if there's an opportunity, I don't know that there is, because 85% of my budget is payroll, so there's not a whole lot of opportunity. But if there might be an opportunity to do something and gain support, I guess I'm asking if there's a chance of taking something that you don't like and maybe reducing something in the operating budget, would I gain both ends? That's kind of what I'm after. I mean, one year I came and said to you, if I go back and recommend these changes, would I get your support? And I believe you did. I'm just looking to try to get somewhere. Because I heard James earlier say, we've been on default budget for a long time.
Yeah.
Right.
We need to get off default, but if there's a way that maybe we could work together, that's what I think we're here for, but we are running out of time.
So you're specifically asking about the operating budget as opposed to individual warrant articles?
Well, I think what I heard is they took the contracts, whether it be para, teachers, and whatever, which to me is existing staff. And so if there's a percentage, or, I don't know if you're gonna support any of it, but I'm just saying, I'd like to know, so that if you're not gonna support something, if there's an opportunity that I can listen to you as to why, and I could maybe trim somewhere.
So balance it.
So I'm trying to balance to get some support, but I don't know what I have support and what I don't have support, so it's tough for me to guess.
I think we have to set a meeting to discuss, deliberate, toss the salad bowl around on both the budget and the warrant articles, and you can listen, because I don't think any of us right now have a clue.
And it's late, and I totally agree, 10 o'clock, your
Just
mind
wanna look
shuts
at it
off.
more.
I know that we're not going to be meeting this weekend because there's going to be a lot of snow coming, so I don't see any of us wanting to play in a blizzard, although I might be wrong.
No, thanks.
And I don't know if you meet in blizzards or not, but I'm pretty sure I'm not
I
going.
do.
I'm not going to
I don't even
ask
close the building.
No, I was
my people to come to a meeting after we've had a
I
blizzard.
could
I'm
get
going to
in.
give them a day or two off. So Neil,
Up north.
will you please ask when we can convene again? The other thing is, I have to look at Naomi and ask this. We need we need to make sure that the cable committee is aware of this. I ran into John Lawton and he didn't know about this meeting tonight.
Yeah, it didn't get, see what happens is it didn't get put on the calendar because it was up in the air.
Right.
And the calendar had already been produced, and they go off the calendar to set the cable up.
And
So that's fine, we
unfortunately,
can just let them know if you pick a date.
okay.
Today is Wednesday.
16th.
Do you want to meet tomorrow, or Friday, or Saturday? Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday?
Friday's out, we're having snow. Saturday is,
Saturday,
Oh, now we're
Sunday,
having snow on
Monday, we're
Saturday?
having snow.
Sunday's a big one.
Saturday into Sunday.
What about
Yeah,
tomorrow?
Saturday morning is probably not snow.
I'm picking Alan up at the airport at between 9 and 10.
I'm not asking you
Okay,
to
so
give up your weekend,
Saturday's
I'm just
not-
asking you to, A,
about
if you
tomorrow?
How
can
about
think about what
Tuesday?
you want to do,
Or
and
how about Tuesday?
just
Yes,
have a
I was thinking,
question.
same thing. Can we do, Monday is the holiday,
Yep.
and I think some of us might be away this weekend because it is a long weekend.
What holiday are we having?
Martin
Martin
Luther
Luther King
King
Day.
Luther King
the
Day.
school's
It's off on
closed.
Monday.
Right.
Oh, okay, thank
So-
you.
That's right, yeah.
We're
So
open.
Can we possibly meet Tuesday?
Yeah. Tuesday?
I don't have a problem, assuming we're not buried in snow.
Yeah, if
Assuming
you
it's-
can.
yes.
And if we are, we move it to Wednesday.
Just have it.
How about,
This is preliminary.
are there people who can, is there someone who cannot meet during the day?
Yes.
Okay. It was just an idea, I didn't know what our work schedules were.
Well, except for the weekend days,
Yeah,
but
okay.
Sunday's gonna
So,
be.
We're
Tuesday,
plowing
the
on the
27th, the 22nd at 6:30?
You're going to send this out,
That's
right?
bad.
Can I,
Yeah, I won't be there Tuesday.
What's the matter?
the schedule,
No.
Naomi, what,
Just
could you just
basketball.
run through the board schedule? Are you meeting
Neil?
on Martin Luther King Day?
Yeah, because the town office is open, we use it as a floater.
You're gonna meet on Tuesday?
No,
Yeah.
Any,
Can you make it Wednesday?
any adjustments you're gonna
Wednesday?
make, we can have on Tuesday with clean.
Thursday's good.
Clean, tomorrow.
I guess
Either
right,
Thursday, tomorrow's good too. But what about tomorrow? Nobody?
I guess what I'm thinking about and what my thought was, is Monday, I really wasn't gonna make a lot of changes. I kinda was hoping to make like one final change, because draft after draft after draft gets old.
So you've
So,
got.
because I have to keep going back to DRA.
So you've got the product for us to look.
You've got the
now.
product, other than I have to just find out if I gotta add two that I explained to you. One is coming off, Article 24 will be replaced with something. And then we'll add one or the other depending on what the opinion is. And then, the thought was, if we could listen to you deliberate, and then if I could pick up on some cues, then I would
Naomi?
take them back to the board.
Can you
Our
get the
meeting-
information for the warrant articles and what's ever
You have 'em.
changed on, all the new stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless the chair says otherwise, it's my understanding that our next meeting would be to vote on recommendations for the town.
Right.
So it wouldn't be, you might hear us deliberating, but we would have reached a decision at that
She
point.
wants us to not do it.
Well, I'm just asking if there's an opportunity to, I'm not sure how that all developed. I'm looking for an answer. So how did they know to run back and do all those things?
Because we've been meeting and attending.
Right, so you've had more meetings with theirs than
Kinda.
you have with me.
Here's what she's asking.
Kinda.
Could we get together, say, tomorrow night? Discuss among ourselves, do a rough vote, if you will, a straw vote, non-binding.
Are
Because
you
what I
available?
really like the
Like a meeting
opportunity
like
to
we
work
did with the
together,
Weare School Board.
is really what I'm after.
Are you available, Naomi?
Am I available tomorrow night? I got nothing better to do.
I'm available, I'll be late, but I can give him my, what do you call it?
You know,
If we
I am
went-
available, I'm not available for the
How
weekend.
late are you?
Like 45 minutes, half
No, if we did it at 7, is that more convenient?
hour. That'd be close, maybe 5 minutes late.
Okay. Do you want to have a meeting tomorrow night at 7?
Yes, but
will not
I
be
need
here.
I need to understand what the purpose of this meeting is, to try to negotiate with the Board of
Well,
Selectmen?
no, I just want the same opportunity.
So she can see which,
Well,
Deliberative.
no,
She
and I'll go
represents
back
them.
to, I'd like the same opportunity. I know we haven't had as many meetings, but if I have a chance to whittle somewhere, I'll use that
Cynthia,
word,
you want me to be
but I
specific
don't,
about what she's looking for?
but I don't know.
Naomi, the only thing that we told the school boards was, if they got their budgets, including any articles that they wanted passed,
Well, we can't do that. We have
Well-
27 of them, so.
We,
including any money articles they wanted passed, if they could keep that under 2.8%,
Neil,
2.8% or less, this is what I told Lorraine.
yes, we did not.
I apologize.
board.
This is what I told Lorraine, and this is what I asked at their meeting.
Okay.
Because they couldn't, the board couldn't make up its mind as to what it supported and what it didn't.
Okay.
So Lorraine spoke up and said, the most important thing is to get the two contracts. And I said publicly, if you can get it below 2.8%, you'll have my support.
Okay,
We're
but,
able to do that.
but you just said all the warrant articles. to
All the
2.8.
warrant articles.
That didn't happen. You only took in the
No,
top
you
three.
told her which ones.
Well, just to clarify,
The one she wanted.
this all took place at a scheduled school board meeting.
Right.
So
But at
it wasn't
no
a special session, it was a scheduled school board meeting where they handed out a draft before the budget hearing. So there were actually two meetings. The draft came out at the scheduled school board meeting, and then the budget hearing also had a comment period in
But
it.
at no time did the Finance Committee ever say,
You were correct.
now, can some different ones of us say, tell you, I'd like to see the budget down to .05 increase and,
Won't happen.
no, but I mean,
Can't.
can somebody say that to you? Absolutely they can. But this committee cannot just out of the gun look at you and say, if we do this, then we do that. That's not the purview
still think-
of this committee.
Well, that's not true.
We did that one year.
Yeah,
We did that 2 years ago. Upstairs, not on TV.
They still need to meet.
Yeah, I think the point that Naomi's trying to make is, goes back to the general issue that James discussed. We've had default budget after default budget. Is there a way for this committee to recommend the proposed budget as a beginning so that we don't, again, live off a default, because it throws everything out of kilter? When we look at increase in the budget, and that increase is off a default budget the previous year, it is different. It's a bigger increase than it would be if the previous year's proposed budget passes. So, tell me if I'm wrong, but you're saying you want to know if there's a way to negotiate that so that you get a better chance of having this committee recommend the proposed budget.
I'm all for trying to whittle. I'm as cheap as it comes as well. But I'm just trying to, I can't do 27 articles and stay at 2.8. It's just not that, it's not gonna happen. But there are some items that I don't know if you support or don't support, because I haven't heard. And that's what I'm
You're
asking.
looking for some feedback.
I'm just looking
That's
for
all it
feedback,
is.
because I haven't had any feedback.
Can this committee
As a
get
group, I haven't had
together
any feedback,
tomorrow
to be honest with you.
and
Yes,
toss
Oh, I
it
can.
off the salad bowl and have a conversation?
I think that's
Just
important. I really do.
Because I haven't had the opportunity for feedback.
I can come, but my day is committed, so I won't have time to go through this in a thorough fashion.
No, we
So
aren't-
you go to bed
we aren't-
later tonight,
We aren't
right?
taking a hard vote.
We're not committing.
We're not committing in anything tomorrow.
No, I
It's more
understand
discussion.
that. But to just even, I've gone through it once. I was at the hearing. I know what's in it.
Okay.
But in terms of saying this and not that kind of thing,
I don't even think, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, I would be concerned to have this committee go through it line by line and say this or that. That's the selectmen's job, just the same as the school would. What we have to do is make a decision on the bottom line of the budget. We can say, can you find X number of dollars to take out of that, and you'd have a better chance of the committee voting. That's
But when we looked at the school budget, we did attack different lines of the school budget. We did raise questions and say, why is this line so high? Why can this not be changed? We did. I know I raised it on computers. Different people did. So the regular budget, proposed budget, definitely is something that we can go after line by line where we have questions, and we definitely should. We should not just say, hey, the Board of Selectmen know what they're doing, because we have seen instances on all the different boards that there have been things that needed to be tweaked. So, no, I don't agree that we should just be saying, this is the board, they know what they're doing, roll with it.
I don't think I was asking for that.
No.
Well, example, and I'm not speaking for the board, but the example I keep bringing up is the gravel, that moved into as a new line item. That's 42,000 and the glass crushing's 15, even though they only use it occasionally for the road. If you take that 57,000 out of the budget, your 2.8 comes down under 2, if I'm not mistaken, when I did the math, for an increase on your op budget.
Okay.
That's just an example.
See, that, I think I actually brought that up at the public hearing. That's something the board
Yes.
should be discussing, the same issue, because, with the bond there, and this is what I said at the public hearing, that I agree that a line like that in the budget is appropriate, because there have been 2 different DPW directors before who have recommended that. But maybe it's something that should be eased in and not in.
Right, but this is not a discussion, the specifics we should not be discussing tonight, because nobody,
No, and
the
I'm
rest
not-
of people haven't.
It's all been example.
I'm reining my group in, because they should not be doing this until tomorrow night or when they have their next
So I'm just
meeting.
agreeing that that's an item that
valid
Bill brought
idea.
up.
Assuming that we meet tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, what would we be discussing? Specifically the budget or all of the warrant articles?
Whole thing.
Take all of it.
Yeah, throw it out there, open discussion.
Open it right up.
Now, Megan, can you make any portion of this?
I have a meeting for work that starts at 6:30. It's high priority that I cannot miss. I do not know how long it will last. It's in Goffstown. It may be half an hour. It may be 2 hours. I don't know.
Could we do Friday?
Well, have you been through it?
I've been through it. I've been through it when we went through it. I haven't been through it a second time.
Here's somebody who's classy.
Since the only, we're not,
She's looking for feedback. not a-
I realize.
Megan?
I don't know if I would have time to go through it again and give, I will try.
If
And I can
If
always
you
send
want
it to Tammy.
to that, or shoot me an email.
I can send it to Tammy and
I
I'll
if
was
any
just
one
hoping
of
to make
us,
it easy
if
for
any
you.
one
It's
of
gonna
us,
be
or
different.
2 or 3 of us are not here, it doesn't change anything.
Because we're not voting.
We're not voting. You can say one thing tomorrow night and do a 180 when we actually have the vote. We're trying to give some, as I understand it, Naomi wants some information about how we feel about certain articles, and we can tell her very candidly. She will take that back to the board, discuss that, they will decide what to do. I'd point out to you one other thing. Regardless of what happens now, and what information she gets and what changes the board makes, we have a deliberative session, and between the
When?
28th,
February 9th.
not the deliberative session, yeah, the deliberative session.
It's February 9th.
February 9th.
Between the 28th, when this thing goes to bed, and the deliberative session, everybody's made their decisions, we've made our recommendations, they've made their decisions. Things can change.
Yeah.
People can talk. So this is an ongoing process.
But I guess what I'm asking is not uncommon.
No, we've done it before.
We've done it before. We did it upstairs one year. I threw out some suggestions of if I could cut. I threw a dollar amount out, and I whittled, talked to department heads, and I whittled, and they weren't happy with my offer. But at the end of the day,
You got a
you
pass
guys
budget.
supported the warrant article for the budget. And I don't know that there's any play. I don't really know, but you fact found the last time we had everybody here, you've had the fire twice, the town and everybody, and you just accepted facts, we didn't hear anything more. So I'm just asking if there's an opportunity tomorrow. I'm not asking you to stay up all night, because I can skip tomorrow, but next week, I'm available.
Tomorrow's fine.
We good with tomorrow night, people?
Okay, so we're going to meet tomorrow night for a general discussion with Naomi. When are we
think-
going to meet to actually make decisions?
Wednesday of next week?
Wednesday of
Or
next
no,
week?
No,
Is
Bill.
Thursday available for, do people have conflict on Thursday
Or do you
next
have
week?
another meeting?
I was just hoping that maybe we could avoid Thursdays. I know it's ski club for the kids. I know it's not a big deal, but for my kids, it's a big deal. It's only 5 weeks.
Yeah,
Can Dad
Wednesday would
take
be
them
better
or a
than
neighbor?
Friday.
'Cause
What is your situation on Wednesday?
But family comes first.
Since you've known about this committee for a while.
Oh, since I've known about Wednesday, too.
Yeah.
Well, I can be here. It will be, we're playing Lebanon that night, and they're unbeaten. And it's here in town.
So no, let's not meet tomorrow night.
No, that's Wednesday. That's next Wednesday.
Wednesday.
We're talking next Wednesday.
How about Tuesday?
You
Oh,
can?
so,
Already.
no,
We
so-
play Conval here. Lebanon's a makeup game.
Okay, when our next official meeting is important, because we're actually going to take votes on recommendations. So
He
let's
has
make
to
sure
be
we
here
get
for
a
that.
date when everybody can be there. Let's
That's
start off with
Thursday.
Tuesday, the 22nd.
No.
No.
Wednesday, the 23rd.
Yeah.
2 noes. Thursday, the 24th.
Yeah.
Is there a no there on the 24th?
You got Megan.
Megan,
Get it
no.
done. My husband will yell at me. It's fine.
Children will hate Thursday, the 20, I have a planning board meeting, but
Can
I'll
we
skip that.
can we maybe do 7 o'clock?
Yes. Yes,
If we
we
do
can,
7,
Megan.
it's going to be late. So we've
I
got
would
27
rather
votes to
the
take.
half an hour gets me here on time.
7.
No problem.
So you better
Okay.
take some medication so that you don't fall asleep at 9:30 or 10.
Or the
I'll be fine.
25th. That's
Too late
pushing
for
the
her.
envelope, but
Too
No.
late for.
Thursday, the 24th,
So are we also doing,
7 PM.
Yes.
And tomorrow night.
Yes, and
Tomorrow
tomorrow.
night is 7 PM
Consecutive
also.
Thursdays.
So 7 and 7.
7
Both
o'clock, 7
Marvin's.
o'clock.
Both?
Yep.
Can, Naomi,
7
can you
PM.
please take care of making sure whoever needs to know about posting this stuff?
In order for us to meet tomorrow night legally, we will recess tonight's meeting until
Okay.
tomorrow.
Yeah.
Good
You can
job.
continue.
Get that minutes.
Then we don't need an official notification, so we're not
But you can
adjourning the
take
meeting.
care of next
We're
week
recessing
with-
the meeting.
Bill, would you consider meeting at halftime for one of your games?
Actually, you laugh.
So the 22nd, we're gonna meet tomorrow night
Tomorrow
at
night,
7?
here.
Yes.
17th at 7,
And next Thursday at 7.
and the Thursday,
you
the
have to bring a
24th at
treat.
7.
Thursday or Thursday.
When?
Now, do we,
It's a home
after
game.
that, do we get together to write the language for the flyer?
That's
Or-
after we
Actually,
do
the
after the
deliberative
24th.
session is where the next thing you have to write for.
Right.
Yes, yes, that's a
Oh,
separate.
You have 2
So
weeks
after the
after that.
24th,
'Cause
then
we're
we
not
get
till the
together
9th.
and blurb.
And because that's just a handout, it's not a mailer, it's not it's not as time-sensitive as the mailer is come
Okay.
March.
And
Yeah, you
we
can come
don't
in
write
Friday the 8th
essays
and make
traditionally
copies.
on this stuff,
All
so.
right.
Okay, you're all set, Naomi?
We're at 6 on the 9th.
We're all set?
Are we good?
Is that better?
Anything else to come before us?
So, I mean, apologize, I just wanted an opportunity like they had the opportunity, that's
That's
all.
understandable.
And you guys all did all the fact
Does
finding.
everybody
and
agree
that's-
it's a reasonable request?
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
reschedule. Schedule the meetings.
So we will
Anything else?
reconvene tomorrow
Reconvene
night.
tomorrow, 7.
We will stand in recess until tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock in the same place.
Good night. Please turn the